live and you're not muted.
Sorry, it's my daughter. And I should have been muted. My stupid mute button. It works sometimes. I guess it doesn't work sometimes. What's up, guys? Welcome back to A Raging Atheist. Let me get out of there.
It's
Um,
showing OBS, not Zoom.
yeah, I just took that off. So yeah, what's up, guys? Welcome back to A Raging Atheist. Um, Busy night for me. Sorry. My daughter came and started talking to me right when I started the intros, and my mute button was on. So stupid mute button.
Okay. By the way, I figured out why you can't see all of us. Go up to the top right, like mouse over to the top right. There should be something that says speaker view, and then if you click it, it'll say gallery view. You're on speaker view right now.
I don't have that.
Okay. Well, I guess you're just going to see whoever's talking.
Yeah, it doesn't give me that option. I have like full screen, and yeah.
There should be an option for gallery view.
Mm-mm.
Normally there is.
Nope.
Yeah, that's weird. All right. Anyway.
Yeah, I had it when I had Zoom. When I had my own Zoom. I definitely remember that. What's up, guys? Yeah. Anyway, so quick announcements before we get to tonight's stream. I'm gonna throw it to Ali. I'm 6 videos ahead. All of those videos are on my Patreon. Please let me know if you are having troubles hearing anybody. You should be hearing everybody. I don't think I looked at my stupid settings. Let me see. All right, yeah, you should be hearing everybody. All right, so after stream moments, I'll be filming after the stream tonight. We'll be on Patreon. I have 6 videos on Patreon that aren't on YouTube right now. Behind the scenes look at my real life with my daughter. There's a short little Halloween clip with me and my daughter. So yeah, there's new perks coming for higher tiers. So if you want to become a patron, I believe I put the link in the description below. Tomorrow's video is very important. The NIFB, the Bahamas. Check it out. You're gonna see it. You can see it right now on Patreon. Modern Day Debate, Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern. I am debating praise. The topic are atheists in it for the money. No shit. So an unrecorded after show on Discord tonight. If you're interested, we'll be flashing Discord in the chat. And in our last show, Allie issued a challenge to any of her skeptics or anybody that had wanted to challenge her. And I don't think we've had any takers, have we, Allie?
Yeah, so apparently either people are running scared or they don't think it's worth it. I don't bloody know. But we are looking for guests for that. It's going to be a dumpster fire. Naka is not a very good moderator. So, like, the fact that he's the moderator means it's going to be a dumpster fire. I really, really want for all those people who have been talking shit or who want to start shit with me in a live chat, who have been posting the troll questions, here is your chance to get to go one-on-one. Y'all keep saying I'm running scared. Well, I'm not. So the Me versus the Room stream will be scheduled as soon as we get 3 to 4 guests. Christians, atheists, anybody is welcome if y'all want to get into a debate with me, polite or not. So we are looking for takers, any of y'all. For tonight, though, tonight's going to be a much more gentlemanly discussion. We are here as a panel of 5 different polytheists. Give me a second. I need to let the guys know to be quiet. Sorry about that. They just got home. They didn't know I was live yet. So we are going to be doing an Ask a Pagan stream as the name implies. We have a number of questions that I've gathered from the community already and a few that Nock has come up with. And so we're going to be going over a lot of the basics at the beginning. Then we will be opening things up to the chat. Now, until we announce that we are, Naka, please mute your mic. Until we announce that we are taking questions from the chat, we might not be able to see it because Nock's having some tech issues on his end because there's 5 pagans in the stream. Of course, that's going to happen. So we're going to try to cover as much of the basics as we possibly can so that you guys can put your questions to good use. So if you post one early, or if you see somebody post one early, everybody who's here, that is already here and is hearing this announcement, let them know to hold their questions until I make the announcement. That said, the questions that we're going to be picking, I am going to be picking and choosing those that I think are most relevant to the topic. If you phrase your question in an extremely rude manner or are blatantly antagonistic, you're not going to get your question answered. So make sure that your questions are in good faith, that you're being intellectually honest, that it's genuine curiosity and not animosity. This is not the you get to fuck with Allie stream. So please don't mess with my guests. I love them all to death. All right. So, with that said, we have folks from 5 different pagan reconstructionist traditions tonight, which is kind of a miracle because we're a bit rare even in the pagan community. So, I am going to go in order and have each of them introduce ourselves and talk a little bit about what their religion is, and then we'll get into the questions. Okay. So first, we're going to start off with Chris, who is a beloved guest. She actually came out as pagan on this stream. For folks who are not familiar, she goes by she, her, and they. So please make sure that we aren't doing any misgendering. I'm going to introduce everybody else's pronouns as well for folks that are new, because I know that we announced this in lots of different channels, so we're probably going to have some new viewers tonight. All right, go ahead, Chris.
Hey, y'all. So I'm a Canaanite reconstructionist, which means that when I look at my religion, what I'm doing is I'm looking back at ancient Near Eastern groups. These are Northwest Semitic groups, and I'm reconstructing what they believed, and I'm applying that a lot to my own religious practice. So for me specifically, I follow primarily the Phoenician and the Ugaritic groups of Canaanites. The Ugaritic groups come by necessity because they are the only primary source for mythology and for ritual texts. None of the other groups really recorded that, so when we get records of them from these other groups, is kind of just a passing mention. I worship particularly El and Ashra as my 2 patron deities. El is usually characterized as the high god, and Ashra is his consort. And then below that, them on the second tier of deities. There are 4 tiers of deities in Canaanite religion. The second tier, I worship Othtar primarily, and I also do worship Anat. I don't actually worship Baal, which might surprise people. And the reason I don't worship Baal is because for me, the way I interpret some of the myths, and we might get into this later, is that Baal and Othtar are in conflict with each other. So out of respect for Baal, I don't worship both of them at the same time because it is rude in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll get a little bit more into detail. Is there any other sort of just overview type things that you want to mention before we move on?
Not right now. I think that the rest can wait for later.
Okay. Cool. Thank you so much, Chris. Carl is actually a newbie guest to our show. He is a friend of Sticks and Stonehenge and a friend of Kingetto's, who is here because the person I originally invited ran into a bit of trouble and couldn't make it tonight. So, Carl, welcome to the show. Feel free to introduce yourself and what you practice.
Hi, thanks for having me. My name is Carl Grimm. I'm a Gaulish polytheist. Basically, I'm working to resurrect, find, or just rebuild the Gaulish culture, which are the continental Celtic tribes of Europe. Gaul was centered around mainly France, Belgium, Switzerland, but the tribes of Gaul were scattered all over Europe, from as far west as Spain to as far east as Romania, and there's even tribes said to have been Turkey. It's definitely a long, hard road for us. There's just not a lot to work with, mainly just archaeological finds, scholarly work that we're just building off of and working with that. My personal path is Druidry. I use that to worship the gods Tyrannus, goddess Artio, others like Sokelos, Nentosuelta, Katubodua, Katurix. Particularly, I follow Tyrannus RTO. Oh geez, lost my train of thought. All right, that's enough for me for now.
Thank you so much for coming. We're really honored to have you. So, longtime friend of Nakasuchi's and co-host on Sticks and Stonehenge, recently came upon his own podcast with a group of other nerds. Welcome, Wolf, to the show, representing Heathenry.
Hey, Wolf the Red here. You guys probably see me around on Noka streams, on Sticks and Stonehenge stream. I've streamed with Ocean a few times. You probably see me around the Discord community as Wolf the Red. I admin and moderate a solid handful of Discords around our community, and I really enjoy interacting with people. I'm a Norse heathen, Norse pagan. I follow, Thor, Odin, Freya, Frigg, Balder, Hel, all those gods and goddesses. My patron deities would be Thor and Tyr. We're pretty tight, and then I've got another one that's a little taboo, but Hel and I we're pretty cool. So, yeah, I've been doing this for about 8 years now, something like that. And I just have a good time. I'm here to learn and here to have fun.
Looking forward to showing off some of those gorgeous photographs. I sent Naka about half of the ones that you sent me. A couple of them looked like they were doubled up, so looking forward to doing that during your presentation. And also longtime friend of the show, co-host of Sticks and Stonehenge. Callan is actually known for talking about heathenry quite a bit, but one of the things she doesn't talk about quite as much is Sumerian Reconstructionism. So she is here tonight to talk at least in part about that. Hello, Callan.
Hi, and I am the snake, but I'm not the hand. And yeah, I do Sumerian Reconstruction, which we actually have a surprising amount considering how freaking old the culture is. The god that I worship is An. I see him as the chief. He is the authority. He is the sky god. And I also worship Inanna, who, to characterize her, is kind of actually a little bit hard. She's basically the goddess who decides, yeah, I want your domain. I'm going to go ahead and take it. Thank you. So, yeah, and that's a good starting point.
All right. Apologies if you guys hear stuff in the background. The guys are going to be leaving fairly soon, but our boarder is currently kind of upstairs hanging out with Dana. They're going to be going to a concert in a little bit. So I figure, as I said, if you guys have questions in the chat, please hold them until I announce that we're going to do questions. If any of you that are here to hear this see people asking questions in the chat, please make sure that you inform them to hold them towards the end. We've got a few questions that Nak and I came up with that are a synthesis of questions that all of us commonly get from the community that we wanted to kind of answer in sequence to give you guys all the basics of the various faiths we practiced. Which, by the way, for anybody who's not as familiar with me, if you're new to the show, I am a Hellenic Reconstructionist, which is to say I am reconstructing the ancient Greek religion. I also consider myself to be more of a revivalist, which means that I update a lot of practices for the modern day. So when we start talking about like ritual format and things like that later on, some of the things that I say are slightly updated versions of things that are traditional. And I'm sure that everybody will be able to get into that a little bit because that's kind of necessary for a lot of ancient practices. You do what you can, effectively. Not everybody, for example, has a burn pit for burning offerings, so some people have to find other ways of respectfully disposing of them. So we're going to do the easiest of the beginning questions, which is what brought everyone to paganism? I'm going to go in the same order every time, so you guys will kind of have an idea of when we're going to go. Chris, you are first up.
Yeah, easiest question, sure. So I actually really first started actually getting interested in paganism when I got into the YouTube side of the atheist community. I originally joined as part of the atheist side of things, and it was actually on my first stream on Steve McRae's channel, because I was on that channel simultaneously with Ocean, who I'd never seen before. And so found out that Ocean was a Norse pagan, and it was very strange to me because I had never met any pagans before. So Ocean is the one that kind of like sparked my interest in it. And then I was toying with it a lot on my own for several months and bouncing around the idea in my head. And so what ended up really at least solidifying it for me was I asked Ocean for a few books that he would recommend on the topic for defending pagan theology. And so he recommended Stephen Dillon's book, The Case for Polytheism, and I absolutely
Fantastic resource.
it was an absolutely amazing book, and that's basically what solidified it for me. But also having a really great long talk with Ali as well, where we went back and forth, and where I first actually started voicing my leanings that way to someone. And so then I came out here on Nakasuchi's stream back in August, mid-August.
Yeah, I remember that conversation. It was absolutely wonderful. It was pretty close to when we met, wasn't it? Like right after the stream?
Yeah, it was literally the stream after, because I think we were on, was it here on Nakasuchi's, or was it Progressive Liberals?
Nope, it was here on Nakasuchi's. I had my first appearance on Progressive Liberals channel last week, actually.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So, well, thank you so much, Chris. And again, Chris is very special in that she did actually come out as pagan for the first time after having been pretty prominent in the atheist community here when we were doing a discussion on biblical literacy and accuracy with Naka. So that's actually really, really cool. And again, I'm so happy that she came back. Carl, your answer to the question, what got you into paganism?
Well, I grew up Christian. My mom was Lutheran, and my dad was, as he described it, a retired Catholic. When I was about 10, I started reading mythology. Started out with Greek, got into Norse, and started getting more into Celtic stuff after that. But I maintained Christianity for many, many years, especially after I got married, and I kind of started to walk away from that after our divorce. I just started, as I started getting back into reading the myths and legends of all these different cultures, it just felt right to me. And I'm a big podcast listener, so I was just looking for mythology podcasts, and I stumbled across something called Druidcast. And after 2 episodes, I just knew this is what I wanted to do. This is the path I wanted to go down. I started getting books, started reading, and I started listening to more podcasts. I got more into the Discord, and I got into more with these groups. And I just specifically decided to go down Gaulish, because Gaulish, the Gaulish tribes is something I've been studying for a couple of years now. Just, Wikipedia pages, people's personal blogs about it. And there's no way to trace your ancestral heritage to it. It's more of a cultural thing. So I just decided that whether I'm descended from Gaul or not, that was the route I want to go. Those are the gods I wanted to worship. I felt that they were possibly my ancestors, and that felt right to me. And I've just been on that path since, and I've never been happier.
Well, and you brought up a really great point here that you do not actually have to have ancestry with the group, that you're interested in when you want to become a Reconstructionist. Sometimes the gods call who they call. Like, I personally have no Greek ancestry whatsoever. My ancestry is British and Haida, as I've frequently gone over. But the Greek gods called me nonetheless. And it sounds like that's what happened with the Celtic gods for you.
Yeah, also, in terms of like Sumerian Reconstructionism, if we had to have some sort of genetic link, there would be no Sumerians, because it goes so far back that basically any sort of like relation just doesn't even make sense when you look at it like that.
So, Cal and Wolf might have swapped spots on my screen, but I said I was going to go in the same order. So that brings us to Wolf. You recently did your deconversion story with Neil, so you talked a bit about this then. Do you want to do a quick summation of what brought you to paganism?
Yeah, for sure. Just real quick, I got, I love the game Skyrim. Turns out almost all of the game's lore is based on Norse mythology, and all of those neat books that you pick up in the game, they have stories that are parallels to a lot of the Norse mythology that the religion is based off on. And so I started Googling I started looking up, Wikipedia stuff for like quests and whatnot, and then I realized that there were parallel articles relating to real stuff, and so I started looking into that, and I was really interested in it. And then I found other people who were interested in it, and I realized it was something that was a valid faith system. And thanks to Ocean and a lot of his arguments and debate tactics that he has put forward, made me realize that it's a very reasonable position to hold. So that's basically how I ended up here.
Well, and you've also had a fairly decent hand at organizing groups and such in your community, haven't you? Like, that's where a lot of these photos that we have come from.
So Ocean and I met in a very large pagan group. We call ourselves Reconstructionists. We try to reconstruct the faith system as accurately as possible using historical references and lore that is written down. A little bit harder to do with ours because so much of it honestly is we have a handful of Christians who thought that it was worth keeping our information, throughout time, because the Norse didn't really write a whole lot of stuff down. And so Ocean and I met each other in a group that was doing that here in our area. We're in Georgia, in the Atlanta area, and we ended up leaving that group for various reasons, but we wanted to make our own thing. And so we got a handful of our friends together, and we ended up growing that group to about 300 or so people. Unfortunately, that did not go very well. It went well for about a year, and then some fluffy bunnies came in and tried to assert their non-historical views on our historical practices, and it didn't jive well for us. So we ended up actually disbanding that group. But we had went like the proper route of it. We filed for 501c3. We had a PO box, and we had tax documents and all that stuff. We were legit. And so we disbanded that group, and we decided to keep it really small. We've probably got about 20 or 30 people in this one. And just because of the way the year is, we've had troubles getting everybody together at the same time. But when we do get together, we have a fantastic time, and we have group chat where we keep up with each other, and we're all just really close friends, and we have a good time with it.
All right, so quick reminder to the chat, no proselytizing whatsoever. Aaron Benton, I'm looking at you. This is your warning. You're going to get timed out otherwise. Okay, so that brings us to Callan. What specifically got you into Sumerian Reconstructionism? And it wouldn't be a Nakasuchi stream if his phone didn't go off once. There you go.
Yeah, as soon as I unmuted on Zoom, too.
All right, so Callan, what brought you to Sumerian Reconstructionism?
So, I've always been a pagan. I'm probably one of the few ones to actually sort of grow up pagan. But I was not originally a Sumerian Reconstructionist. I was a Wiccan, particularly with Celtic Wicca. Although I did have a brief time where I practiced Roman polytheism as well, like with augury and whatnot. Pretty much, Nana helped me out through some really tough times, which I won't really go into for very personal reasons. And so I started looking, and there was a lot more than what I thought there would be in terms of information that the Sumerians have given us. And yeah, that's what I've been doing ever since. Well, that in Norse Reconstruction, but I'm a Sumerian tonight.
Well, and we can get into syncretism later if people are interested in how traditions can sometimes intersect and how personal practice can get. But I will get into mine a little bit before we move on to the next question. I had two personal experiences with the Greek gods. The first happened when I was a Wiccan, and my response to them showing up basically during a vision quest, and no, there were not drugs involved. I drummed myself into alpha state because I was trained in spirit walking practices by my great grandmother and my grandmother and my great aunt. And I had done this as a way to sort of meet with the gods on the other plane as part of a self-dedication. Problem was, the gods that I was dedicating myself to were not the ones that showed up. Hermes and Athena, in the vision that I had, told me that I was theirs. It was Hermes specifically that said something. And my response was to throw a shit fit like a bratty teenager and tell them to fuck off. And I continued to ignore them for several years until later on, when I was attempting to be somewhere between an atheist and agnostic. I felt really disillusioned with Wiccan practice and was didn't realize Reconstructionism was a thing, but was desperate for something. Like I was disillusioned, but also still like feeling like something might be there. I guess I was somewhere, like I said, between atheist and agnostic. I hopped into a float tank and I was trying to think about my novel when I was struck with another vision, specifically of Athena. And the feeling could only be described as the old-timey definition of the word awe. It shook me through my core. I almost lost the ability to speak afterwards. And when I came out of it, I was left with sort of two bits of messages. The first was that I needed to learn how the hell to give an offering, because there's no reference for that in the Wiccan faith whatsoever. And the second was that I needed to build shrines. And so, like, when I started looking into how does one give an offering to a Greek god, I stumbled across the Reconstructionist community, and it felt like I came home. So that's what brought me to this particular form of paganism. At some point, Neil and I are going to do a deconversion story, because I grew up extremely hardcore, like cult level evangelical. And so my journey to paganism was kind of a bumpy ride. So the next question that I had was, in your system, what does a basic ritual structure look like? Now, remember, you've only got 2 minutes, so you can't get too deep into the minutiae, but if folks are interested in any one of our particular paths and want to know something more in detail, make sure you make a note of who you're interested in hearing from, or like what particular path you want to get into a little more detail, and we'll get a little further. So we will start with Chris. What does your basic, like, daily ritual offering structure look like?
So mine is pretty basic. I have a small first thing that I have in my Canaanite beliefs is we have vessels for the gods. We very much use a lot of idols when we are praying, when we have sacrifices, when we have a ritual practice. So at my altar, I do have around 6 different idols that I have for my different gods.
Can I stop you for a second? We have a couple of Christians in our chat. Can you define idols from your perspective as opposed to the way it's often used?
Okay, yeah. So an idol for me is something that the gods come to inhabit. It's not something that's, inherently a god in and of itself, but it's something that the gods come down and they inhabit so that they have a presence there physically with you. This is a very common belief, especially in Canaanite practice and ancient Semitic practices in general. This is versus the interpretation that many evangelicals have had, where they literally would interpret idols as being the gods themselves. It's far more complicated than that in its metaphysics, actually. But after that, the first thing I do is I choose which god I'm going to pray to, or like if when I'm starting my day, I usually always pray to El first, and then to Asherah. And if I'm doing sacrifices, I usually do a wheat sacrifice, and I do have myself a small burn pit. So I will I spend an hour where I will do a burnt offering for them.
And so just to clarify, you're using the term sacrifice here not to specifically mean blood sacrifices, but to mean any offering that you give specifically to the gods.
Right. There are several kinds of sacrifices in Canaanite belief. We have wheat and barley sacrifices. Those were very common. One of the more typical ones that people tend to think of is a blood sacrifice. I don't do that myself because it is hard to do in the present time. So I do have a modernization that I have to do here.
Well, one
So,
really common one among Greeks is to bake like a cookie or something in the shape of an animal, or like a piece of bread or something like that, cut into that shape, or that sort of thing. Like, what would you do for yours?
For mine, I try to find as close to a suitable substitute as I can. Things like that, actually, where I will try and actually weave strands of wheat into an animal shape for the god that I'm sacrificing to. Or on occasion, I will also do occasionally do it with meat of the animal. As a substitute as well.
All right, we are coming up on the end of your time.
Okay. So yeah, my typical day, I just do wheat as a burnt offering, and then I spend after that usually about a half hour in meditation.
Okay. That sounds like a fairly in-depth practice. Would you say you practice daily? Or would you say, like, are there a specific calendar that you follow, just as a quick aside?
I try to do it daily myself. There are days where I of course can't do it. So on the days that I can't, I usually like if I have to go somewhere, I'll carry a smaller idol with me, and I'll try and do a short prayer session and short meditation session on its own, and then I'll try to do it in sacrifice at some other point, or make up for it at some other point.
That's a lot of dedication. All right, so Carl, I'm going to start the timer as soon as you start talking. What does a average, say, daily rite look like for you in your tradition?
Well, it's kind of tricky with Gaulish polytheism because a lot of it we're trying to discover. Segamoros, who is in our one of our Gaulish groups on Discord, wrote out what a typical ritual would look like, and we can only go on so much, so we're just building it from scratch.
Well, let's try to talk about like what you're kind of doing. Like, I know that Kengetto, for example, mentioned that usually he'll start with like a ritual bath with scented oils and things to begin with to purify himself. Like, do you have a similar practice?
Sometimes for certain rituals I try to perform, I'll try to do a ceremonial cleansing, a shower with like Singetto said, just some oils, something scented. For me personally, on a daily basis, my day's pretty busy, so I try to do something. I'll usually do I'll take a coin of some kind and put it in a mason jar as kind of an offering. Typically, I do that to Cernunnos. Um, I try to do a daily prayer. If I have time, I will do a burn offering. I have a little fire pit out here. I'll get a small fire going. Maybe do make a little stick figure out of branches, and make that as kind of like an offering to Tyrannus, as an example. If I wanted to do an offering or something to Sukelos, basically a lower world god, I would dig a hole and bury it. Upper world gods you burn, lower world gods you bury. Um,
Very similar to Greek practice.
there are a lot of similarities here. Yeah.
Whoops, that's my timer. So just a quick side question. Chris mentioned her altar. Do you have a dedicated ritual space? Like you mentioned your burn pit. Do you have a dedicated altar space, or is it something that you kind of put together when you need it?
Right now, because I'm still building I call it a proper altar. I'm still working on that. But so right now, I have this. It's a above ground burn pit. I use it as kind of like a temporary altar. It's worked out very, very well for me though.
Okay. Thank you very much. Wolf, your sort of daily practice, the structure of your heathen rituals, you can talk about your group work too if you want to. Knock, this would be the time that if you want to pop up some of the visuals and stuff for the altars and things that Wolf sent, like he
Yeah,
provided
I
lots and
actually
lots of
had
stuff for that.
I had a bunch of people. I in our Discord server, I asked everybody to kind of, and I let them know that I would be showing it on public, but I asked them to send in their altars to show off what a bunch of different people would use for their altars. So definitely, please, if you can get that up on screen, I'd love for people to see what
So
people are
the
using.
one that he just put on screen is actually mine. So that's a Greek altar for you guys. The altar cloths were left over from my Wiccan days. But Knock, if you want to rotate it over to the next one, that gives a kind of frontal view of that particular altar. So that's the dodecatheon, all 12 of those there. So, looks like it went black for a sec. We're just having a second. Oh, there we go. That's one of yours, Wolf, that just popped up, the one with the antlers. It's the full view of the one with the antlers and all of the statuary and the skulls.
Take a look here. So that is my buddy. He goes by the name of Torbjorn or Elg in the community. A lot of people know him as Elg. But he's a great guy, and he's got probably one of my favorite altars that I've seen ever. He's got a whole corner of his living room set up, and there's a couple close-up shots where he's got all of his god statues sitting around a really nice stone there. But for my daily practices, I actually have a very small Thor statue, and there's probably a picture of it in there somewhere that I know I sent. But it's only about 4 inches tall, and it's expertly carved by a wonderful lady named Artrada from, I want to say, the Ukraine, and she made that for me. But I've got a home altar of a handful of gods and goddesses. I want to say there's a really nice picture of it in there as well. But I've got Thor and Frigg as the two like main deities in my home hearth cult. And I know cult sounds like a negative word, but in the there I am with my drinking horn there. We did a Thor bloat last year and last summer, and that was me hailing Thor there with that horn. But cult is not a negative word when it comes to these types of situations. It's
Sociologists and archaeologists use it to refer to the worship practice of a particular deity.
That's right. That's my Thor statue there on that stool. We had a very lovely ceremony for him, ritual.
Do you want to talk about the piles of rocks and sort of the way that they serve as an altar in heathen practice? Because we have a few of those up here that have come up so far.
So our group was called the Burkano Hearth Union. You can probably Google and probably still find some information on them, but that group is the one that disbanded. So the idea behind Burkano Hearth Union was that we are a union of hearths, and the hearth is the heart of the home. And so each of us would bring a rock that from our home, and we would that picture right there up on screen, that was my gender announcement, but I turned it into a pagan altar. Turned it into a heathen altar to show off that I'm having a boy, and I'm really excited about. But so yeah, in my group Hearth Union, we would all bring a rock from our homes and build our. I'm gonna mispronounce this, and Callan can correct me. Hogger, I believe is how you pronounce it.
Hogger.
Yeah, Hogger, and that just basically means rock altar, and we would build the altar out of our individual rocks, so that no matter where we went, because we would move around a whole lot, a person would rotate out who would host for the month. Or even if we went somewhere like in a public space, we've had a couple public space rituals in state parks and stuff like that. But we could always build our altar no matter where we went, because whoever showed up had a rock to contribute to the altar. And when we would bless the altar, which bless comes from, it basically just means to bathe in blood or to clean with blood. We would not use blood in our pagan rituals because we wanted to make sure that nobody felt like they couldn't be there if they didn't want to be around blood. And a lot of people would say like, oh, it's not really a bloat, and bloat is a religious ceremony with blood and alcohol, in the heathen sense. I know
So
I'm throwing a whole bunch of information at you really quickly, but I'm trying to get through it all before my time's up.
yeah,
But
so my time technically went off, but I want to give you a chance to talk specifically about your hearth cult since we're kind of talking about individual pagan practices. You got a little bit of extra time to go through all your pictures and stuff.
okay,
Because you brought
But,
some really gorgeous visual imagery with you, and I thank you so much for thinking of that. Like that's a big
yeah,
deal.
absolutely. It's really hard to convey the ideas of what we do on a day-to-day practice, or when we get groups together. The group pictures, and there's so many that I can't post because so many people aren't out of the broom closet, as it were.
Yeah, that's
They
completely
haven't come
fair.
out
You don't
to their
want to dox
families,
people.
and I've got thousands of pictures. I've got hundreds of videos that I just can't share because I don't want to dox anybody or get anybody in any trouble. But those are the ones that I knew that I could. And there's just a lot of really, really cool. There's a lot of really cool stuff that I could show. But for my personal practices, so I'm big on mead. I don't drink very often at all, but I like having it around to share as an offering. And so usually in heathenry, an offering, if you're not going to use a live animal, which I don't use live animals in my personal ones, I'm not against it. I will do it when the time calls for it, but in my home practice, I don't do it just because it's a little bit more convenient. I share food and I share drink. I usually share some of my own personal meal, and we have something called the whites, WIGHTS, whites.
Landbiter. Mhm.
Yeah, land whites, and they are basically just spirits of the land. Um, they are the ones who would receive the offering if you were to like leave it out in the woods, and the gods kind of communicate with the whites. I communicate with the whites. I communicate with the gods. For me personally, it's a whole bunch of feelings. I don't really get words. I don't have conversations like I would have a conversation with a human. I get like I get personal feelings, and that's how I kind of like have my relationships. But they're very strong feelings, and I feel like I can kind of interpret what it is that's going on, and so I know kind of what it is I need to offer. And I just usually go with the safe thing of food and drink. And mead is a big one for me because in the lore, Odin is the one who stole the recipe of mead and gave it to mankind. So we wouldn't have alcohol if it wasn't for Odin. And it was supposedly the first alcoholic beverage of mankind.
So just as a quick question, when you give offerings of mead, do you do it in the form of libations, if you're familiar with that term?
I will, if I feel like it. Sometimes I don't even partake at all. Like I said, I'm not big on like just casually drinking. Me personally, I don't knock anybody who does. But I will pour. I've got a really nice horn cup. It's basically just a shot glass, but I will set it in front of my god statues. I don't know if you can find it, but there's a picture of statues sitting on a fireplace. They're in front of a fireplace, and those are my personal statues for my personal hearth. So if you can find those and put it up on screen, those are the ones that I'm referencing. But I've got a tiny little horned cup that's about this tall, and it's supposed to be a shot glass, but it works really well as a cup for the statues, I personally feel. And I will pour a drink for the god that I'm offering to, and I will set it in front.
I might have accidentally missed that one when I sent the images to Knock.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah, I'm not
that's
seeing
mine.
it.
But
I'll see if I can get it to him on Twitter so we can get it into OBS.
Okay. But so yeah, and food, I'll just make a plate like I would make a.
Yeah, I wish I would have had more time to coordinate with you on the pictures.
We lost you, Wolf, unfortunately. I think you froze. I'll give you a chance to jump in and jump out again. Yeah, that looks like it's on Wolf's end. We'll give him a sec to come back. Knock, I'm going to send you the other image on Twitter really quick. Make sure that you aren't going to have anything that you don't want seen open on Twitter before you head over there. I think I should be able to DM you on there. I think we're mutually followed. Yep, I can DM you. All right, so here is the other image. You should be able to open that up.
All right, just a second.
That's the one he was referencing.
All right, yeah, just 1 second.
I just sent you the picture on Twitter, the Discord link. So while Wolf is getting his stuff back together, because it looks like he's having some tech issues, because again, there's 5 pagans in here, it's bound to happen. Callan, do you want to talk about your daily Sumerian reconstructionist practices? Because we talked actually a little bit about them in the past, and some of them are very interesting.
Yeah, some of them require other people, but the ones that don't. So, like, in terms of, like, offerings and whatnot to Inanna, I tend to offer, like, barley and black beer, which are traditional offerings to her. Oh, Ulfer's back.
I'm so sorry about that. I don't know what happened.
All right, I'm going to let Callan finish really quick,
Yeah,
and then
please
we'll
finish.
come back to you talking about, like, mead and libations and, you know, whether or not that's kind of what
absolutely.
you're talking
Finish
about.
up, Callan. I'd love to hear what you have to say.
All right, and I did just get Knock the image, so.
Another part, though, of my tradition, and this comes from the association with the with An, is like sky worship. So there's a little bit of an astral theology. Like, for example, Inanna is the evening star. So literally, the planet Venus to me is sacred, as are various others. So sometimes I will pray facing the planet Venus and whatnot, in various other forms.
There we go. So Knock, the one you just had on there, that really pretty fireplace, that's the one that you were talking about, right, Wolf?
Right. Let me pull it up here.
All right. So
yep, that's
you were
mine.
talking.
So from left to right, that's Tyr, Balder, Odin, Thor, Frigg. Can you put it back up for me? Because I've already forgotten what I was looking at.
Yeah, sorry. It comes. It'll be right back up.
But I've got the picture right here. I don't know why I don't just.
Oh crap! All right, let me go back. Here you go, Wolf. Sorry, this will be better. It's just like a 20-second delay.
Yeah. So from left to right, that's Tyr, the god of justice, Balder, Odin, Thor, Frigg, that's Freya, and then Hel, then Ir, and then Skadi. Yeah,
Ocean's in the house.
Say again?
I said Ocean's in the house.
Ocean, what's up, bud? But yeah, Ocean waves. Ha ha ha. Get out.
Yeah, I need to ban him one real quick.
So you said you were asking about libations. So I will pour the drink out.
Not gonna mute your mic or I'll mute you.
I'll either pour it out on my altar itself and just kind of let it dry on its own, or if I'm out in the woods, I will pour it out on the ground. Now, if I'm partaking in ritual, like if I'm doing the once a month ritual thing, because every month we meet up on a historical date ahead of time, and we will choose a god or goddess or a group of gods or a group of goddesses centered around whatever the time of the year is. So for like Thor, we would meet up and we would hail Thor. We would pass the horn around. The horn would be full of mead, and each person would say their kennings. They would say their hails. They would say what they were thankful for in that moment. Give thanks to Thor and maybe another god or goddess if they were feeling like it. But the main focus would be Thor. And then they would take a sip from the horn, and everybody would yell, "Hail! "Hail Thor," and it's all just like really loud, but also extremely reverent. It's kind of like interactive church, but extremely loud, and everybody looks like a Viking. Because we all wear ritual garbs. I've got a full set of leather armor that I wear because I believe that spiritual practice is a battleground, and I want to be ready for battle at all times. But yeah, so I hope that answered your question.
Thank you. So Callan, you were getting into your Sumerian practice, and I will restart your timer because we kind of were waiting for Wolf to get back. So you
Yeah, I
got caught up a
totally
little bit.
stole the show. I'm so sorry.
All right,
You're fine.
so I'm going to start the 2-minute timer. Feel free to go through kind of what a basic ritual structure looks like, and like, you know, altar, calendar, etc. Like how your ritual practice works.
All right, so yeah, basically, I have an altar to Inanna at this moment, and also to An. And as for my practice, I offer barley black beer when I can, which isn't as often as I would like because of money fit stuff. And also wheat. Wheat was another huge offering back during the times of Sumer. And other than that, I also read and sing hymns in what is pretty close to accurate Sumer. At least we think it is, because we actually have to reconstruct it via Akkadian, as I'm sure Chris knows. And so, yeah, I will sing hymns. They're very long hymns, but they are beautiful. And I also partake in a version, so to speak, of sky worship, which is basically like going out at night and then looking up and honoring the various celestial bodies that are associated with the various gods.
Okay,
So,
and
there.
do you worship every day, or is there a particular calendar that you follow?
There would be. I need to do more work on that. But generally, like, I try to worship every day. In terms of like nighttime strides, I tend to do that on weekends when I don't have to get up for school.
Okay. All right, so for my answer to the question, and for what it's worth, guys, I've got myself on the same timer I have you guys on, and I'm going to be a lot less lenient with myself than I have been with everybody else. So Hellenic Reconstructionist practice, there's a lot of different ways you can structure it depending on what your theology looks like, but I follow the Attic calendar as presented and researched by Labris, which is a Greek Reconstructionist group that puts on public ritual in Greece. The Attic calendar is actually lunar in origin. It starts in July, August. That's the first month from the new moon to the new moon. And each individual day in that lunar calendar has deities and spirits that are associated with it. So the way that Hellenic Reconstructionist practice starts is you start with a purification. You create something called lustral water by extinguishing a piece of rosemary that has been set aflame in Hestia's candle. Hestia is the goddess of the hearth. In water while uttering a purification prayer in Greek. You then wash your hands, sprinkle your face, the altar, and the room with the water in order to purify yourself to be in the presence of the gods. And then offerings are made, typically anything from oats for the spirits, libations, often of red wine for the gods, honey, olive oil, number of different food offerings. I also do not do blood offerings as part of my Demetra cultus because I grow a lot of my own food. She's very heavily featured in my spring and summer practice and in my fall. So my worship of her, I'm vegetarian as a part of that. The gods that I worship every single day are Hermes, Athena, and the Mosai, which are also known, for those who are not familiar with them, as the Muses. They play a huge part, along with Apollon, in my creative process because I write for a living. So making offerings to them every day makes sense. I have shrines in my office, and I also make offerings and prayers at the main altar. Once the offerings and prayers are done, a final libation thanking the gods for their presence and asking them never to leave is given. and then the ritual space is closed and things are, you're supposed to burn them, but unfortunately, because there's burn bans in my area, I have to wrap them and bury them, which is an example of that sort of updated revivalism that I was talking about. So that's kind of what my daily practice on average looks like. There's also a special set of ceremonies that are done on certain days of the month called Numania and Triakas. Triakas is a celebration of Hecate and the ancestors. Numania is a grand ceremony that worships all of the 12 main gods of Olympus and several of the other gods that were often worshipped in Greek house cultists. They all relate to what is known as the oikos, or the home. Similar to what Wolf was talking about with the heart, the oikos is central to Hellenist practice.
Yep.
So that is kind of the way that my daily practice works. I'll get a little more into the details when we get into some future questions. But yeah, that's how that works. So the next question on my list is, let me get back to the question list I said, everybody. How do offerings work for you? Do you burn them? Do you bury them? Like, are there different styles of offerings that you give for different gods in particular? We touched on this a little bit when we talked about ritual, but I kind of want to dig into the details a little bit, because 2 minutes is a pretty long time to explain kind of the way that offerings are given. So we'll start with Chris.
Yeah, so I do actually have specific different rituals that I will perform depending on the deity, and also depending on what what in particular I'm doing my sacrifices over, because there are certain calendar events where you are to perform certain kinds of rituals. So, for example, when I when I make an offering to Ashra, Ashra is especially associated with plant growth, and one of her main symbols is actually they call it the Ashra tree, and it's a totem that is basically a tree trunk that basically grows up into Ashra. It has a feminine body from the trunk up. And so one thing that I do have an association with as a ritual with Ashura is that it's planting offering of a different plant, usually a different kind of tree. Especially I like to plant a small sapling or a seed for a spruce tree. Or cedar. Cedars are the most relevant.
You've got about 30 seconds left, Chris.
Okay. For L, I do burnt offerings. For Othtar, I do. It's a celestial ritual, very similar to what Callan described, because Othtar is associated with the planet Venus.
Okay. Thank you very much. Carl, would you like to, you mentioned burning your offerings and burying for the, like you'd call it in Greek, you'd call them the chthonic deities or the underworld deities, as opposed to I'm trying to remember what the actual, because we usually call them the Theoi for the deities that are of Olympus, but there's another word for it that I know can apply more broadly to religion. I just can't think. Iolic deities, I think, is the celestial ones. But what do you want to go into a little more detail about that? About like which deities you would burn to and what sort of offerings you give regularly?
Yeah. So basically the general Gaulish pantheons, because each tribe had their own specific pantheons. You typically have the upper world gods, or the gods of Albios, the celestial beings, which are Tyrannus, who's the sky god, the thunder god. Brigantia, who's the goddess of fire, also seen as the goddess of mountains. Then there's the lower world gods, and there are Gaulish words for them. I just cannot remember them off the top of my head right now. I apologize for that. Plus, I probably couldn't pronounce them right anyway.
Gaulish is such a hard. It's so hard. So don't feel bad.
It's so confusing. I want to learn.
It's not as hard as Sumerian. I will say that.
I will get it one of these days. I am working on it, but
I believe in you.
All y'all bitches don't know how to speak Haida. Just saying, there are sounds in that language that do not exist in any other language. Anyway, go on, Carl.
Look, we don't even know all the sounds in Sumerian.
Well, I tried speaking Welsh before, and that I can't do it.
So,
But,
getting back on topic about typical offerings you make to various gods.
For Tyrannus, a lot of the historical records would typically say that he likes the Wicker Man offerings. I just make a little stick figure, which I try to make not look Blair Witchy at all, and I'll burn that. It just each god is very not super particular. Typically, they'll just if you have good intent in it and it means something to you, they'll typically take it. I try to make it more personal. Like Kernunos, he typically likes coins. I'll pennies, quarters, nickels. I try to do that as a daily offering. He also likes acorns and seeds. Sometimes I'll eat an apple and I'll offer him the core and toss it out in the wilderness, as an offering to him. Sukelos, Nantoswelta, some of the lower world deities. Typically, I've found that a personal item of some kind they enjoy. I have some rings I used to wear back in my older days that I try to put the past behind me, and they seem to really like just me bearing my past in a way. They seem to like that.
You've got about 30 seconds left because I stopped the timer when we all interjected.
Oh, gotcha. That's basically it. Like I said, just because we're still learning more about the Gaulish god, it's typically if you put meaning into it, if you whatever your intent is, they typically accept it. But that's it for me.
Well, yeah, and that's a really important point. When you make an offering as a pagan, obviously in the modern day, we're not offering like our ancestors are, where like when you slit the throat of a chicken or a cow or a pig or something like that, like you are slitting the throat of your livelihood and giving it as faith to the gods. But it is often important that your offerings still be meaningful, that they feel like, as many people put it, a sacrifice.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I'm a hunter, but I don't do any kind of blood sacrifices or anything like that. But yeah, if it's got personal meaning to you, that's something that the gods really seem to take in, and they really like when you offer that to them.
So we lost Wolf again because of tech issues. So now we're going to move on to Kellen briefly, and Wolf will have to chime in after her.
So also for me, well, pretty much I just leave it out there because like burned offerings aren't something I can exactly do at the moment. Other than that, I mean, it's pretty much what I just stated. Oh, as for like a particular prayer position, there is a position that I do practice, which was given in Inanna and Ebich, which kind of looks a little similar, except your nose touches the ground, so to speak. It looks similar to like how Muslims pray, except your nose touches the ground, and there's also like quite a bit of chanting involved.
Okay, and are there particular offerings that you favor for particular gods?
Yes,
or is there one that you tend to present to all of them?
Yeah, it depends on the god or goddess, because, like, for example, Nanche, she is the goddess. The best way I can describe her is as a goddess of social justice. She is the one who will tally up your deeds at the end of the year, and that will like determine your be part of what determines your fortune for the next year. So like to make an offering to her is in a way also to do like service to others, like going to a food kitchen or something of that nature.
That makes sense.
So
right.
Yeah, offerings can vary radically.
Okay, and Wolf, Mr. Tech Issues himself, you seem to be the one getting struck over and over by our tech curse.
I don't know what's going on. I have to turn everything off and come back in, and it's fine, like nothing was ever wrong. What was the question exactly, so I know exactly
Did
how
you
to
kick
answer
off Hermes?
No, I'm not that stupid.
All right. Sorry. For anybody who's not familiar with the event, I'm not going to go into it, but that is a very old inside joke that at least 3 people here were present for. So you talk about personal experiences with the gods. That was a hoot. All right. So the question was, how do offerings work for you? And are there particular offerings that you consistently give to particular gods? Like Carl, for example, mentioned burying offerings to chthonic deities and burning offerings to celestial deities. Do you have something similar in heathenry? And do you have particular offerings that you give to specific gods when you worship them?
So it depends on. So when I do specific offerings, I save those for ritual. I save those for group ritual when we meet up like every month. For my personal offerings at home, I keep it very simple. I believe that the deities are appreciative of the sacrifices that I make when I make offerings to them. And it doesn't always have to be food. Sometimes it can be like a piece of art. I'm really into wood burning. I will wood burn runes. I will wood burn pictures and stuff like that. And I will burn those. And those are really the only things that I will burn. I'll give you a really good example. In November, last November, and then the one we're planning right now, I'm actually talking to them right now about Blot Manath, which is the bloat of November, where you make sacrifices to appease the gods for the coming winter. You're preparing for the winter, and to gain their favor, you're willing to sacrifice one of your own animals, not people. Don't really do human sacrifices. To kind of get around that, last year, because we were still part of a big group and nobody wanted to like actually kill an animal.
Last 30 seconds.
Not in group. We would do like, I've got a goat made of hay. It's in the shape of a goat, and I burned that. And so that's really how we do it in like group ritual. It depends on which god or goddess it is. You would give something specific that you know that they like. Like some goddesses do like apples. I heard that talked earlier. Or Odin would really enjoy mead because he worked so hard to steal the recipe. So stuff like that.
Okay. So for Hellenic polytheism, there's a number of different offerings that are given, sometimes multiple offerings to the same god, depending on, particularly if I'm petitioning them for something, I will often give extra offerings. Though later on, we're going to get into reciprocity a little bit. That's not exactly bribery. It's a show of appreciation for gifts to come. There's a distinct difference in sort of the attitude. And I know that this is a personal pet passion of Wolf's, so I know he's probably going to get pretty deep into that when we get to that topic. But as far as offerings that I give, I mentioned a libation. And what a libation is in the Greek faith is it is liquid that is poured out of a vessel, either into another vessel if you're doing it indoors or onto the ground if you're doing it outdoors. If you're worshiping the Aeolic or Olympian deities, you would slowly turn the glass and whatever is left you could drink. If you're worshiping the chthonic deities, you do what is called a koes, which is you take the glass and you completely upturn it 180 immediately to thrust on the ground, and you don't consume any of those offerings. Much like what Carl was talking about, if you're making offerings to chthonic deities, you do not burn them, you bury them. Particularly if you're doing funerary rites, you would bury the offerings in the grave, generally pomegranates and such. Other offerings that I give, in addition to libations, which are often milk, honey, red wine, and water, depending. Like heroes and spirits and ancestors get sober libations. Red wine is reserved for the gods, and Helios in particularly loves libations of honey, and Athena loves libations of olive oil. I also, during the harvest season, will give the first of my harvest to Demetra, and I give offerings of olives almost daily to Athena. So, another generalized offering that can be given to almost any of the gods is incense. Some gods favor certain incenses, but in ancient times, frankincense was given to all of them. So if I don't have any myrrh, or I have myrrh incense that I grind up, I also have dragon's blood and a few other types of incense. Styrax is another one, though it's a lot harder to get my hands on. I grind that up by hand regularly, and I keep it in tubs, and I give that out to the appropriate deities that are interested in it. So that's how offerings work in my faith. So, do you believe in or practice magic? Why or why not? Chris.
To I definitely do think that there is magic. It depends on the part of this is going to be how we define it, but for how I'm going to define it is I do believe that there is this an ability for us to be able to interact directly with the divine and have an influence on how certain aspects of the divine can also interact with us and with the world around us. So for example, I do a lot of rituals myself around healing, because I'm someone that has a lot of health problems myself, and a lot of people I know have health problems. So I do constantly do a lot of an invocation and witchcraft, which is meant to aid people from a realm of the divine. So very commonly, I invoke the god Eshmun, who is the Canaanite healing god. In Hellenistic traditions, Eshmun actually became syncretized with Asclepius. But yeah, my Greek is terrible.
Asclepios.
Asclepios. So basically, I do believe that there is a definite ability for us to have an interaction with the divine that can also cause an influence on our world. So if we define that as witchcraft, then yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. I didn't even have to get you on your last 30 seconds. Carl, do you believe in and or practice magic? Why or why not?
Yeah, I do believe in magic. I don't. I mean, just so to clarify, when I say magic, I don't mean like Disney, Harry Potter kind of stuff. Nothing that defies physics. I believe magic is a part of the natural facet of this world. It is something that comes from the other world, the world of deity. Other than that, I mean, any further than that is harder for me to describe. Like Chris, I typically try to do more healing magic. I've been working with Norse runes. I am going to start working with more Gaulish runas here in a little while when I'm able to purchase them or make them myself. Yeah, that's about it. I don't practice a whole lot, but it is something I'm looking more into. Anyone who is interested, I recommend John Michael Greer's books. That's where a lot of the stuff I learned from that.
Okay, thank you very much. Wolf, do you believe in or practice magic? And if you want to add a definition like Carl did for what magic is, because I know that there are some in the Wiccan circles that say magic is just focused prayer, so therefore offerings are a form of magic, versus kind of what I'm describing is more the specifically gathering together various sympathetic objects and uttering prayers and commands in the expectation that it will cause change, as opposed to petitioning a deity for change.
So no, and yes. Personally, I am not extremely magically minded. I do pray, so if you want to define prayer as magic, sure. I don't define it that way personally. I know that there are ways to like set up wards around yourself, and you can meditate for a certain way and have certain things happen a certain way. I don't personally do that. I know several people who do that are extremely close to me. There are many people in my Hearth cult who do, and I've asked detailed questions about that, and I'm interested in it. It's just not something that I'm practicing at this time. Now, however, on the other side of that, I like to collect things, especially from nature. Like one ritual we did was in a state park near a really nice lake. I found a bunch of sticks that beavers had stripped of their bark and had cleaned down smooth. And they were all probably about that long or even longer. And I collected a whole bunch of them and I brought them home and I've placed them on my altar.
And we have lost
Yeah,
Wolf
I
yet
think
again.
we lost Wolf again.
Army strikes again.
Pagan Tech curse, guys. Well, hang tight and he'll be back in a moment.
He will return.
Callan, I know you have a fairly succinct answer to this question. I personally don't include divination under the definition of magic for myself, but I'll let you go ahead and talk about your definition and your stance, because you and I have had some interesting discussions on this topic.
So I'm just gonna. So yes, I do believe in magic. All right, we're done. Let's move on. No, I'm kidding.
Do you practice it? That's the other half. So now we need another yes or no.
So this is where it gets kind of weird because I need to look more into Sumerian magical praxis. Because when I was moving from my Wiccan tradition to my Sumerian one, I kind of took a bit of a different view and more viewed it as interaction with the gods in a way. So much like Chris, I would, except for me, it would be I would pray to Baba for healing and whatnot to use the, I think it's Girsu. That's where he is the patron deity of, and various others. Now, my other tradition is where I do more of my practical magic now, but I'm also going to be looking into various things like divination with water and whatnot. That was also said to have occurred with the Sumerians. I just need to find the sources.
Okay. All right. So, Wolf, we got about as far as sticks that beavers had, and then you froze.
See, that's so wild because I can when I get kicked off, I heard you guys tell me that you lost me, and I could see you guys no problem. It was super weird. I'm very upset at my internet right now, and I don't know what's going on because I never have this problem. I stream weekly.
All of the gremlins at once. There are 5 of us. We've attracted all of them to this location.
That's really got to be it. I blame you for because it's not me.
Well, I think you also need a cat because that cat is just adorable.
Okay, so at any point did you suggest that Hermes was a Roman god?
No. Yeah, I don't know. Now I'm scared. So to finish,
Hermes is a Norse god.
I hate that I keep dipping out. I feel really bad about it. So yeah, at one group ritual we had, I found a bunch of beaver sticks that had been stripped clean. They were really smooth and had neat teeth marks all the way down them. They were all like about that long, maybe a little bit longer. And I collected a whole bunch of them. I brought them home and I stuck them on my altar because I thought that was really cool that the animal had cleaned it but then left it behind. And they just kind of, I can't help it. They reminded me of wands. Like they reminded me of a thing like that. So I do like stuff like that. I don't believe that there's like this. Personally, I don't believe I like pretty rocks. I like to collect rocks. My whole family does. Anytime we go anywhere, we usually pick up a rock and bring it home with us. I don't believe
you're on your last 40 seconds, Wolf.
I don't. I'm not one of the wooey pagans that thinks that crystals heal you and have super magical powers and stuff like that. If you do believe that, that's cool. That's on you. That's just not something that I subscribe to. I just really like cool things like that. So maybe there's a little magical thing tied to that, but for the most part, no, I don't do a whole lot of magic stuff.
There was a very long stretch of my life to where I believed that crystals could heal me. It was part of my Native American thing.
Yeah, and there's a lot of history and lore and stories that you guys have to back that up. We don't really have that in Norse mythology.
Yeah, I don't believe in it anymore, but yeah, they do. They will sit there and tell you for hours like how it'll work, and I believed it for a while. But I'm like, I still have all my
Rocks
crystals.
are the corpse of Umir.
I have all
Okay,
of my
so
crystals in my bedroom. It's pretty like it's like a light show if I get the lights going right.
So, to our two heathens in the chat, Wolf was tagged by Ocean. Was there a hallowing of the stream to banish all ill wights? If not, it's your fault. He
Oh
didn't say, if not,
man,
it's your fault, but he did say, was there a hallowing in all caps of the stream to banish all ill wights?
I forgot to light the torch and circle my router. That's what's going on.
Yeah, you really screwed this one up,
I
Ulfer.
screwed it up.
You know what? I made my offering to Hermes today. Screw all of you.
I think it could possibly.
All right, so we've got two more of my questions next, and then I will move on to the ones. Nock, did you compile a list of yours, or do you want me to read off yours as well?
I'll go through a few. Like I'm not gonna read all of mine, and when I get to mine, we can make them really quick answers.
Yeah, because I still want to be able. We might need to go a half hour over our.
Yeah, that's fine.
Time,
I want to get the
still
chat.
Want to be able to open up
Yeah,
to the chat.
I want to give the chat a chance.
For sure.
Okay, so last three questions it looked like of mine, but these ones are a little easier to answer. I think they're a little quicker. Some of them are. One of them is: do you believe that gods other than those you worship exist? Yes or no? And what is your philosophy on why you do or do not worship them?
So for me, yes, I do believe that other gods exist. I believe that Eliakais and Kalans and wolves and oceans and Karl's gods are all just as real as mine. Mine are better.
Ha ha.
But I'm also somewhat syncretistic. So I'm not strict Canaanite. I have actually been syncretizing a little bit, especially with the South Arabian deities. There, a lot of them are very similar to ours and have some of the exact same ones as ours. But yeah, as for why I don't worship the other pantheons is mostly just because of how drawn I am to the Canaanite deities in particular. I feel just very close with them. I feel very comforted by them. It's very it's hard to describe. It's a very calming and soothing place for me to be. And so it's mostly just down to the way that I have had my personal experiences with them that I have chosen them in particular.
Or do you feel as though they called you or that they chose you? Because I remember in our conversations, you said, when you were first kind of floating this, that you felt as though you had been called, that you'd had an experience with one of these deities.
Yeah, very much so with the god El. I very much feel like El called me into this particular set of beliefs and these particular practices.
Okay. Thank you very much. On the tail end of your...
Can I
go on.
ask real quick, just to add on to your question, Ali? Chris, I know you were an atheist, and for most of us, and I explained this to Ocean, who's in the chat, and a couple of the other polytheists that I know. I think for a lot of atheists, our beef is with Christianity, and a lot of times I think, and when we get to my questions, we'll kind of deal with the atheist community and pagans, but I think a lot of atheists kind of have a washover effect, if you will, when it comes towards polytheists, and they just kind of lump your gods in with the Christian God. Do you think that the Christian God is real, Chris, and all of the other panelists as well?
So I believe that the God of the Old Testament, Hashem, or Yahweh definitely exists. And I personally don't have much of a problem with him. When it comes to the New Testament and Christianity, I tend to think that Christianity is more a. This is where it's going to get a little unpopular, but I tend to think that it's more of a bastardization of the Hebrew Bible.
Well, one people could almost
the-
call it cultural appropriation to a certain degree, since a lot of the documents were written in Greek.
Yeah, I think it's more that I think when it comes to Christianity is they have more invented the God that they want. Because if you look at the way that Yahweh is portrayed in the New Testament versus the Old Testament, very different person. New Testament God would have you think that he is a perfectly benevolent being. Old Testament God has no illusions about that. He says outright in Isaiah that he is the God that creates evil. He has no illusions of being a perfectly good being, as it were.
That's fair enough.
That's an awesome answer.
All right, so rephrasing the question slightly for Carl, do you believe that gods other than those that you worship exist, and does that include Yahweh? If you want to add a little blurb about your opinion of Yahweh, you're welcome to.
I totally believe that other pantheons exist. I don't always do synchronism, or yeah, that's a hard word. But no, I respect all the pantheons. I'm just more drawn to Gaulish. I do follow some Norse deities as well. But of course, I acknowledge the Japanese, the Slavic deities. I respect them. I respect all the gods, including the Christian God Yahweh. I was Christian for a long time, so Jesus and I are fine. It's just my issue is more with the church and how a lot of stuff are done now. Sorry if anyone's offended by that, but no, Jesus and I are cool. I'm fine with the Christian God. It's just he's not my guy anymore. That's basically it.
That's completely fair. All right. You were the most succinct of all of us so far. Wolf, do you believe in that the other gods exist, including Yahweh, and your opinions of him? And, give maybe a little bit of reasoning of why you may or may not worship other gods outside of your chosen pantheon.
My goodness. So, yes, I believe that every god exists. I believe that every god exists all the way down to what could even be gods that we don't know of yet. I believe that there are gods out there that we don't know of yet, we haven't discovered. And I believe that it is possible. I don't have a whole lot of evidence on this, and I don't have any evidence on it, and I'm not extremely married to this idea, but the idea is entertaining that we can bring gods into existence by creating situations where we worship new things that we didn't have before, like tech gods. But
You mean the gods that you ticked off tonight?
Yeah, exactly. Apparently, but to get back onto the main question, yes, I believe that they all exist. I have no authority to decide that one god exists and another god doesn't. We can look to historical evidence and records that are kept to decide in what capacity they might have existed. We can look and see where certain deities might draw parallels between each other. Maybe they are similar gods. Maybe they are the same god with different names. But until we know for sure, I'm just going to say, yeah, sure, they all exist. Why not? Because for me personally, it doesn't matter if they do or not. I'm only worried about the ones that I'm worshiping. And to steal a line directly out of Ocean's mouth, I hold my position provisionally. I'm a polytheist provisionally. And if you can 100% for a fact show me and prove to me that my gods don't exist, I'll probably stop being a polytheist and become an atheist. But until that day comes, I have sufficient evidence for myself to believe that mine do, and that's why I worship the ones that I do. I believe that Yahweh could exist, no problem. I don't believe that he exists the way he's described in the Bible.
Last 15 seconds.
I believe that Christians get a lot of that wrong, personally. There's way too many contradictions and whatnot. If Jesus existed, he was a pretty chill dude. I wish he had commented on a couple of things that were going on in his time, but otherwise, he didn't do anything exactly wrong that I find morally objective. But yeah, I hope I answered all of that.
Yeah. Thank you. Answered quite thoroughly. All right, Callan.
Oh, that's right. I am here. So, I believe that I believe that pretty much. I believe in other pantheons. I even believe that the three gods that the Christians worship exist. And as for Yahweh in particular, never met him, but I hear people have, so I have no reason to doubt it. So yeah.
Well, very, very succinct from Callan. I have a very similar answer, and this, I think, speaks a little bit to the question that we'll be transitioning into shortly, which is what differentiates polytheists from Christians, because we, in our breath, can acknowledge the existence of their God, but not his exclusivity to worship, but frequently they cannot. They feel the need to reclassify our gods into idols or demons or other things in order to be able to interact with us. So, this is part of the reason why polytheists aren't really interested in converting people. Most of us are called to our faiths, and many of us were atheist or agnostic before we came to them. So, this is one of the big reasons for our stream tonight, is to kind of outline where we are coming from on these sorts of issues. So, to answer the question, I'm answering very similarly to everyone else, with my usual, I believe Yahweh is a god. I also don't believe everything written about him is true, and I think he's kind of an asshole if even half of it is. So, I personally think he's an angry war god that may have chilled out over the years and tried to rebrand if he really is the god that the Christians came into contact with. I have reason to believe that the Christians got a lot wrong about him. There are a lot of angry war gods between all of our different faiths, so there's nothing particularly unusual about that, apart from the fact that a bunch of his followers decided to unite under effectively a cult leader and try to rebrand the Jewish faith towards their ends, and it spread all over the world. And a lot of our faiths were killed off by force because of it. So I have a lot of reservations about it. I think that if Jesus actually was a historical person, which there's some evidence that he might have been, then he, if anything he said was true, he was either a brilliant cult leader or what Greeks would call a demigod, which is to say the son of a deity that is mortal, which means that the whole Trinity thing is fucking ridiculous. So that's my take on that particular question. So the next question, I think I'm going to skim over the how do you know you're doing things right. I think we can actually cover that in the Sticks and Stonehenge, getting started if you're interested with Reconstructionism stream, if you guys are okay with that,
Yeah.
because we are getting up on time, because we have been talking about doing that stream. So the next question is, what is the biggest difference between your faith in Christianity in your eyes, and why?
Oh boy.
So if you had to pick one.
If I had to pick one, I think the biggest difference, and what I think is the most important difference, is that I'm allowed to be angry at my gods, and it's not a bad thing that I'm angry at them.
Oh, absolutely.
In Christianity, I was constantly having a fear because I was upset with Hashem, and it's one reason I respect Judaism a lot, is because both Judaism and my faith have a practice where it is okay to wrestle with God or with the gods. It is okay. It's not a problem. It's why the book of Job exists. It's literally an entire book with a guy committing near blasphemy.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, Carl, what would you say the biggest difference between your faith and Christianity is, and why, if you had to pick one?
Phew. I would say lack of judgment. I mean, back when I used to be a Christian, every church I would go to, I would walk the line, pretend to be the good boy that they all wanted me to be until I started to relax and started to let some of more of myself show. And then I would just start getting alienated because I swore every now and then. Uh, it just, the feeling of you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, you're bad, you should be punished kind of a thing is not in my tradition. It's not in my faith, and it's not in my beliefs as well. The gods want us to be who we are. They don't want us to change for them, at least in my experience and in my opinion.
That makes a lot of sense. Like feeling open and accepted in your community and not feeling as though the deities are breathing down your neck, I think is very much, it's something I've heard quite a bit from a number of different Reconstructionists and pagans as a whole. So Wolf, I know that you've got a lot to say on this one, but if you had to pick one.
I can sum it up pretty quickly, I believe. Mine's coherent. No. Okay, for real.
That's it.
They've got Christianity has a salvation issue. Christianity has a doctrine and dogma issue. Norse heathenry, we don't have that problem. We don't have paperwork telling us we have to behave a certain way. We don't have gods who are trying to inflict their will upon us in such a way.
Wait, you didn't get that contract, Wolf?
Yeah, for sure. We don't have
okay, good. Want to make sure.
deities that are trying to control us or make us do certain things, or we don't have to jump hoops and put on a show. We don't have to worship them. It's not required. And when I say salvation issue, Christians have to do a certain thing a certain way and believe in their heart of hearts a certain thing a certain way, or else they burn in hell for all of eternity. We don't have that at all. At most, there are certain realms of the afterlife in Norse heathenry that you have to die a certain way or with a certain status to end up in a certain realm. Otherwise, everybody just goes to hell, Hel, or Helheim, and it is actually a beautiful place full of rolling hills, full of farmland. Your ancestors are there waiting on you. You basically get a second life, and you get to hang out with all of your old family, some of the family you've never met before. The goddess Hel walks you to your homestead, and it's supposed to be this most beautiful thing that you transcend to. So I could talk on this for hours. It's easily my favorite thing to talk about when it comes to comparing the two, but that's basically it.
Yeah, that's something that I've heard a number of heathens, including Ocean, bringing up when we've talked about it. When we did our Fundy question stream, that was something you talked at length about. If you guys haven't seen that, it is over on Sticks and Stonehenge. We did a answering fundamentalist questions stream where we addressed a number of questions that Christian and atheist fundamentalists, and the definition of atheo-fundamentalist is on that stream, so please don't bombard me with crap in the chat about it. We've talked about it here too. If you guys haven't seen that stream, it's long, but it's well worth a watch. We go pretty deep into some of these topics, and one of the things we talked about at length was how the various pagan afterlives tended to depend more on what you died, or like how you died or how you lived, rather than what you believed in, and how that's a huge difference between pagans and Christians. So, Callan, your answer to this question.
My answer would be that the very mindset is different. So Christians have to focus on what they think is, they have to be the absolute truth, and they have to deny all other religions. Whereas for me and other for me, I can go ahead and I can say, yes, Canaanite mythos is true. I can say, as well as heathen tradition is true, as well as Sumerian tradition is true, even though they're multiply contradictory, because they both have multiple truths in it. There doesn't need to be one single spiritual truth, if that makes sense.
Oh, it
And
definitely does. And I wanted to clarify something for the live chat really quick because this has been brought up now by multiple people. But the Ocean did a fantastic video on this, so we're not going to get too deep into it. But nobody specifically called the Christian God ridiculous. We called the concept of the Trinity ridiculous because the concept of the Trinity is theologically and philosophically incoherent in the way that it's often presented by Christians as doctrine. And that's where a lot of us have an issue with that. Nobody here said the Christian God itself was ridiculous. Specifically, the concept of the Trinity is the thing that we were all mocking because Ocean did a fantastic video laying out all of the reasons why we all have a problem with it. So do you have anything else you want to add, Calvin, or should I jump over to mine?
So I think the best way. So basically, yeah, I don't have to smash other people's traditions. In fact, I can even grant their traditions as true, and can actually talk and interact with different polytheists and have meaningful exchange. I know it's shocking to have a religion that allows you to look at other religions and operate around, as opposed to having to constantly try to proselytize to them.
Yeah,
So,
every person in this room, except for Carl, who's kind of new to the group, but like the four of us have all had fantastic discussions without ever once having to deny each other's worldview. You know what I mean? Naka can unmute himself if he needs to. It's one of the beautiful things about Zoom.
Sorry, I'm putting in the live chat that I'm literally the only one in the room that thinks the Christian God is ridiculous.
Yeah, a lot of us think the Trinity is ridiculous, but none of us said the Christian God himself is. We just don't think everything written about him is true. That seems to be universal among us. And some of us think he's a dick. So, now we are on to Naka's couple questions, and then we'll be opening things up to the live chat. So, Naka, you sent us a few questions. You don't have to go through all of them, because a couple of them, I think, fit within the questions that I had prepared.
Yeah.
So if you wanna bring some of the ones that didn't have answers already, then we can go over those. Most of these are pretty quick yes/no things.
Yeah, I think I'll save my heathen question for the after stream. That'll be the question that we put for Patreon, and it'll eventually be on my YouTube channel, but it'll be 4 to 6 months from now. But I am interested in that question. But I have a few questions that I really wanted to ask tonight, and it's based on a lot of the interactions that I've seen with Callan, an atheist, a lot of the interactions I've seen with Ocean, who's in the chat, and atheists. And it's,
I've interacted with atheists.
Yeah. I've gotten a lot of toxic response from my fellow atheists in the streams that I did, highly supportive of pagans. And if you can't tell, it doesn't fucking affect me because here I am surrounded by pagans. But I really want to know, you've answered the question, how do you feel about other religions? But how do each of you feel about atheists and agnostics? How has animosity from the atheist community changed your perspective maybe towards atheists and agnostics?
All right, I'll still be keeping time. We'll go in the same order we've been going in, even though now Nock's the one asking questions.
Okay, so yeah, I luckily have not had a whole lot of the toxic side of the atheist community come at me for my polytheism. More where I've actually gotten it is because I tend to be on the more defensive side of Christianity and of Judaism. But it has severely affected a lot of my image of the atheist community. Like just how tribalistic they get and how vehement a lot of them are, especially, and I hate to bring this up, especially from Arn Ra's crowd. The rhetoric of, if you believe in a God, you're mentally insane and stuff like that.
Aaron Ra actually spoke out against that sort of rhetoric. So, like, are we talking specifically about folks that you believe? Like, I'm going to try to preface this. Let's not start drama with other channels. Let's not call out specific people, please. I know that you have some problems specifically with, like, Aaron Ra and other things, but, like, we kind of want to keep things generalized at least a little bit. We don't want to start drama, and Aaron Ra is actually an ally of the channel. Naka's going to be having him on pretty soon.
Okay.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I haven't reached out to Aaron Rob, but I'm going to. We're gonna see.
We're hoping to have him on pretty soon.
Yeah. But just a whole lot of that has been really eye-opening to me on a lot of things. Also, and a lot of the tactics that I've seen used to try and dismiss both Christianity, Judaism, and pagan religion in general have been very I try and keep it nice, but
Just wait till it gets to me.
It's been toxic.
The arguments just seem very heated, very disingenuous, and it really has just lately left an extremely bad taste in my mouth for the community in general. And it like really has alienated me like the last few months.
Yeah, I can. You know, I stay off of Twitter a lot. I don't get on it too often. And when I do, and I see some of the interactions, you know, like for me, it's like as a Christian, and I know probably many Christians would attest to it. Like our whole lives, like we were taught that these things were myths, and these gods didn't. It's not even like they didn't exist; they were just like made up and not real, right? And so I think a lot of times our animosity towards Christianity spills over, and I'm not speaking for all atheists. I know, but so a lot of times what I see is just like, holy shit, what the fuck? Like, why? You know, like just like why? So it's. To me, all of you guys are allies, and we have a lot of the same goals and aspirations when it comes towards, you know, freedom of expression, freedom to be yourselves. You know, I've had conversations with a lot of you and with people in the chat about how, you know, I'm all about what, you know, harms society. Like, how does it make you as a person? Is it able to influence your perceptions? I'm really interested to hear from others about how their perception of just, and not all atheists, because a lot of atheists are allies. So a lot of atheists, I think, are open to having a broader conversation about theism and kind of differentiate our feelings towards Christianity and maybe the harms that we've experienced in our past. And I am personally trying to get over the indoctrination as a pretty much my whole life that these gods weren't even like they were just made up fictions. And you know, now I often say that about Christianity, and a lot of times I say that because that's what they've always said about you guys and your gods. And you know, if you study history, what you know, Ali had referred to it, they pretty much tried to wipe you guys off the planet. Yet here you are on my channel right now, explaining for anybody that would like to have answers exactly who you are. So I'm very intrigued about this, and I just hope that maybe atheists, if you're listening, maybe be a little more open-minded and actually have real conversations, and maybe not think that all theists are Christians. You know, that would be my plea.
Well, and that's a really good point. Like, part of the reason why we're having this panel is to celebrate the diversity of theist thought. There are so few platforms upon which people like us can speak because we live in a hegemonic Abrahamic society. You know, we live in a society, haha, but there is a truth in that. All of us here live in a country where Christian hegemony rules. If you start talking about the Bible, anyone's going to know what you're talking about to a certain extent. If you start talking about
What's the
any of our
Bible?
faiths, people are referring to mythology. And so part of the reason that we're doing this is so that, particularly atheists and agnostics who have never really talked to one of us can see a lot of the differences between the way that we believe and the way that we treat our faiths and the way that the people that they're fighting against do. Which brings me to Carl. Carl, if you remember the question, we're talking about your experiences with the atheist community and how you feel about atheists as a whole.
Well, unfortunately, I go on Twitter quite a bit, and I've read a lot of negative, toxic stuff. I don't paint the entire atheist community with that brush, but it does make me feel alienated. It does make me feel that a good majority of atheists aren't willing to have the discussion, or I'm not going to get any kind of respect from the atheist community. Maybe not necessarily as a whole, but as a majority. I mean, Nock, you're the first atheist ally I've met personally, and I've talked to one-on-one, which is nice. And it's good to hear that there are a lot more atheist allies. It is a very relieving to me, because up until today, I kind of thought that we had no backing from the atheist community.
Well, yeah, and just as
that's essentially
just as a quick aside, just off the top of my head, Neil the 604 Atheist has had, at least a couple of us on, and has several of us scheduled to talk about our deconversion stories, even though we're pagans. Cyrus the Skeptic co-hosts a show with Ocean called Hammered Out, where he talks about, pagan issues.
Shannon Q just had a great stream about how belief in God is not a mental illness, and she's been a great ally as well.
Yep.
Yeah, so there are a number of atheists in the community that are extremely accepting of us. It's just that many of them aren't as vocal on platforms like Twitter.
And yes, sense. Chat questions are welcome. Just real quick, we will have we'll give you a chance, plenty of chance to ask some questions.
Yeah, after this.
Okay, do you have anything more to add on to your answer, or do you want me to move on to Wolf?
No, that's basically it for me.
All right, Wolf, you have been very vocal with a number of our atheist allies, so I am looking forward to hearing the snark in your answer.
All right. So,
because you've also gotten into fights on Twitter, so you've been on both sides of this.
So it's actually kind of funny. I come from I'm being a little snarky here. I come from an extremely privileged position when I start this small short story. I found Ocean before. I found Ocean when he was at the height of his debate power, and so he brought me into the community, and I was kind of in his shadow, and I may have had a little bit of a I won't even call it respect, but that's the best word for it, is a little bit of a respect boost. When Ocean would introduce me, he would introduce me as his friend Wolf. And so all of these atheists who might have probably tried to tear me apart in the beginning, instead kind of gave me the nod of approval ahead of time, because Ocean already had a ton of respect. But I feel like on Twitter and on Discord and other areas like that, I've definitely earned my place when it comes to interacting with the people. I'm a really chill dude. I'm really nice. I don't mean to be that humble, but I look out for people. Noko will tell you, I'll randomly message him 2 a.m. and just check on him and make sure he's doing okay, because we haven't talked in a little while. I like to keep up with people in the community. I like to make sure everybody's doing all right. I'm a dad. I like to make sure that just people in general are doing okay. So I've got a lot of atheist followers on Twitter, and I follow a lot of atheists on Twitter. But yeah, people like Shannon and Neil and Cyrus and countless others are, those are just the big ones that pop out at me.
Progressive Liberal is on that list too, even
yes,
though he does
absolutely.
mostly lefty streams.
I'm in Progressive Liberal's Discord server. I'm in X-Cult Baby's Discord server. I'm in
Mr. Atheist Telltale. There's a lot. Yeah.
AR, Atheist Rationale. Just all of these great people I have come to know, and some of them really good friends, some of them nice acquaintances, and maybe one day we'll be really cool friends. Whatever.
Last 30 seconds.
Don't have a problem with atheists at all. On the flip side of that, anti-theists, I have a pretty big problem with. If you don't like me because I have a faith belief, we need to get to the bottom of what that is, and we need to make sure that we're not dismissing faith belief as a delusion or a mental illness, because there's a lot of baggage that comes with that statement, and I feel like we could work through it in a really progressive way to get to where we can understand each other a little bit better.
Well, and I'll add irrational. Automatically claiming our beliefs are irrational before you even understand the basis of them is another one.
And I'll totally agree
doesn't
as well, because I was an atheist. I was a staunch anti-theist that often said that all theism was a mental illness. I mean, I would literally have streams just making fun of God belief in general. And, you know, it took a lot of reflection to realize, no, my beef was with the Christian God. My beef is with what that religion has done to the society around me, and I need to be really careful and start really looking at my own biases, and are my own biases justified, and if they're not justified, then how am I any different than a lot of the people I stand against, honestly. And I think a lot of atheists need to do that, because I think too often we're so willing to become what we despise, and we don't need to do that.
So if you, real quick, I'll wrap this up really quick. But if you go on my Twitter and you look at my tweets and replies, there's probably a good handful of them where my tweet just says Abrahamic faith asterisk, because so often I see atheists say all religion is bad.
Mm-hmm.
And then I go, nope, it's Abrahamic faith that's bad, asterisk. Let me correct that statement for you, because you really can't point to anything that my faith personally, or anybody on this stream right now, you can't point to a harmful thing that our faith can claim. You can't say, oh, their gods do this, or they're doing this because of this, or they're trying to indoctrinate people, or they're trying to do this, or this. We don't have that. Good luck finding one. Now, there are shitty pagans out there, no doubt, but they're not shitty because they're pagan. There are shitty Christians out there because Christianity can be kind of shitty. And I can point to very many reasons why.
Mm-hmm.
And when I talk to Christians and I go in depth with it, they usually end up agreeing like, yeah, that is a problem. All right, well, I'm glad we're on the same page.
Well, and most of the Christians who are in the more progressive side have to jump through a number of hoops with their own texts in order to get there.
Yep.
There are some that just I have a few Christian friends that I would characterize as allies. A friend of mine, he's actually a Baptist preacher.
Oh, me too.
But
Yay.
he's a pro-feminist. He is fine with pagan faith and promotes and says that it should be a thing in society. But on top of that, he's also a Christian that's like, yeah, there's some really, really scary stuff in the Bible, and that's stuff I have to contend with. He characterizes it as, I basically am in a constant conflict with God. But he very much wants to be an ally towards a progressive side of society, and towards pagans too.
So we're going to open up discussion for the chat in a moment, unless Naka has another question. I know there was one more question you wanted to ask, but I don't know if that was the one you were referencing specifically for that. But I was just about to say, we just cut into Callan's time. She has not gotten a chance to answer this question, and neither have I. So I want to make sure that she gets her time.
That other question, I'll just pose it as like my closing statement. And then the heathen question we'll save for Patreon.
Okay.
All right.
So I get to talk about atheists.
You get 2 minutes, Callan, and again, remember, no specific names.
Okay, let me just say this. Even if I wanted to give specific names, I couldn't, because there's just been such a wall of vitriol that I've met on Twitter. My experience with atheists, like overall, at least on Twitter, has been extremely negative. I've even had transphobic slurs shouted at me because of my theism, which is really confusing. So, yeah, there are good atheists, like Noka. However, the toxic part of the community, the sort of baby alligators, as one can call them, the fresh atheists, they seem to grow quite a bit in number, and they make a lot of other atheists look really, really bad.
Well, and for what it's worth, they tend to be very loud. Like, they tend to be the ones that will insert themselves into discussions that they have nothing to do with, in order to mock a polytheist, which is why it can look like there's so many more of them than there probably are.
Well,
Yeah,
I do think that atheist numbers are skyrocketing here in this country. Here in the last 10 years or so. So I do see a lot of new atheists, and I've often made videos about this, that I think it's like a progression. That because I think a lot of us are angry. When I made A Raging Atheist, I was extremely angry, and I had all these years of repression. Hopefully in this more open environment of having these discussions, because we didn't have these discussions, at least I wasn't aware of these discussions when I first became an atheist 15, 16 years ago. Hopefully that will maybe lead to less toxicity. But go ahead, Callan. I didn't mean to cut you off.
but yeah, basically, I guess looking at the atheist community overall, what I'll say about it is there really needs to be a sort of a cleaning up of the, so to speak, atheist household, because a lot of it is not like, a lot of it is very colonial and fundamentalist Christian without the God.
At the risk of whoring out like Ocean's channel, he did a wonderful video on latent Christianity that I think every atheist and at least half the pagans should watch. Like, that video covers a lot of where I think this toxicity stems from, and he did a fantastic job representing it in a very even-handed and fair manner, I think.
Yeah, I've heard that he's called like the atheist whisperer.
Ocean is fantastic. But I mean, Ocean paved the way for all of us, right? Like, he kind of came into the community through his associations.
So my thing is this: is so I stand in opposition to Christianity. I stand in opposition to what it's done to my family. I stand in opposition to what I think it's done to this country. And to me, what you guys represent, paganism, polytheism, all these old religions that Christianity tried to kill off, they wanted you guys dead. And if you're an atheist and you stand against Christianity, in my opinion, you should take the allies you can get, and that includes Christians. Don't get me wrong. Like I think I said, maybe I didn't clarify. I am no longer of the position that even Christianity is a mental illness. I used to be of that position. No, I think it's just a bad idea, and I think that we get indoctrinated into these bad ideas. And if you're not doing me harm, I'm not gonna. Do you, boo, and have fun doing it, and I'm going to appreciate the unique person that you are. I'm going to stand in opposition to things that I feel like I should, and that'll be tomorrow when I'm going at the NIFB again.
All right, and everybody here has heard me be very vocal about my answer to this question, but part of the reason that I'm a moderator on this channel and that I help run Naka's Discord is because I believe that as religious minorities in a primarily Abrahamic hegemonic set of worldwide cultures, atheists and pagans are natural allies. We both oppose we both oppose theocracy effectively. We both believe in religious freedom, both freedom of and freedom from. I think that atheists and pagans have more in common with each other than either of us do with the Abrahamics. So, that's why I ally myself with, Surus, Ocean, Naka. Ocean's not an atheist, but like Ocean is allied with atheists also.
Damn it, I was about to say you gave away a huge secret.
Shannon Q and Progressive Liberal and, Neil the 604 Atheist. I'll be coming on his channel at some point to talk about my deconversion stuff. Like, the reason why all of us are here is because, to some degree, all of us believe in that allyship because we're all fighting the same garbage. And I think that that's the most important thing. I think that conversations like this help us all to see why that's so important. So,
Yeah.
Naka, do you have any more questions that you want to ask, or do you want me to start pulling a couple of the ones from the chat that I've seen over the last couple of minutes since I said we were opening up after this question, or maybe one more? Because there's a couple of them that I think are really good.
Yeah, we can get into those. And anybody in the chat that has a question, add a raging atheist. It makes it easier for me to see personally, or add Ashley, because it would make it easy for her to see.
Yep. So I am going to reiterate, I'm picking and choosing questions. If you put something up that's blatantly disrespectful or rude, I've seen a couple of those, you're going to get ignored. Like, we need intellectually honest discussion. Also, if you have a question for a specific panelist, make sure you ask about their particular faith or that you mention their name. That way, people who, if you have something specific, we can make sure that that one person talks about it.
And
So,
real
first
quick,
question-
Allie, can somebody, because I'm not on Discord right now, lag reasons. Looks like maybe we have some. No, we don't. All right. Can somebody in the chat throw in the Discord link for the
I can
after
do it real
show?
quick.
All right. So, the first question that I noticed in there was, do pagans have a dogma like the Bible? And this question, I think, is one of the big distinctions between our faiths and theirs, because it gets into things like mythic literalism and such. So I'll let Chris start, but I'm pretty sure all of our answers are going to be pretty similar.
Yeah, with my religion, there is no strict, this is exactly what you must follow to be Canaanite. When we look at these ancient groups like Ugarit, where we have most of all of our rituals and myths of Canaanite religion recorded, we're also dealing with a religion that was a complete fusion between Canaanite and Amorite pantheons and religious practices. So there isn't this strict dogma, this is exactly what you must always do, etc., etc. There are, prescriptions for different rituals and things that are laid out, but outside of this is what you do for this particular deity when you have this particular ritual, there really isn't anything else other than that.
Okay. Carol.
There's not really much of a dogma, especially for Gaulish polytheism. I mean, a lot of us are kind of multiple tradition. Like I mentioned earlier, I also follow a few Norse deities atop of my Gaulish deities. There's not really any rules of do or do not, and if they are, they're kind of more like guidelines than actual rules. Like, this has to be done, type of deal. It's I mean, really, Chris nailed basically what I'm going to say. So that's about it.
Okay. Wolf, your turn.
No.
Do you want to go any further into that, or just no?
No. No dogma, no doctrine. We don't have papers or God trying to tell us how to behave. Yeah. Just
You haven't gotten yours in the mail yet?
shit.
Yeah. What about the like
I'll be right back.
slitting the throat of the goat and making an offering and oaths and all that happy stuff? Like, what about that?
That's not required. You don't have to do that to be a Norse heathen.
Vikings lied to me.
Yes, they did.
All right.
All
Callan?
fair. You remember we have to do that thing at Uppsala, right?
I'm gonna ban Callan.
All right. Callan, your turn.
I've been banned. Anyhow. Dogma. No. I mean, like, if you try to mischaracterize the gods or whatnot, I'll probably correct you, but if you have good enough SPG and whatnot, then I'll accept it. Like, I know that a lot of Viking groups will mistakenly refer to Inanna as a mother goddess, even though it kind of goes against her character. So, yeah. No dogma.
So, I'm going to answer this question a tiny bit more at length, and that is that in my experience, the vast majority of pagan faiths are orthopraxic rather than orthodoxic, which, you know, for the Latin root words means, or Greek root words, I'm not sure which it is, which makes me a bad Greek polytheist, but ortho means right, praxis means action. So, right action as opposed to dogma, which means belief. So we are more concerned with what you do than what you think. You can get into, you'll notice Hellenists getting into fights with each other about theology, but ultimately the answer to those questions is personal. You know, like Platonists are going to disagree pretty heavily with Stoics, are going to disagree pretty heavily with Epicureans on the nature of the gods. So, you know, Rilla cracked a joke earlier in the stream. You ask 10 different pagans about what they believe, you'll get 20 different answers. And that's because we're more concerned with what you do, and particularly for Reconstructionists, whether it matches up to historical record. So, next question comes from AR, and I'm going to slightly rephrase it, but AR asks, would you consider your gods to be physical, spiritual, or how would you define them?
I think that it's this is my own personal opinion. I think that the divide between spiritual and physical is a bit nonsensical for me. I consider them I consider them interconnected, and I don't think the division makes that much sense. I view the gods as being very much involved in the physical realm. As to how I view them as very complicated, but as to how, like, let's just say I view them in a physical anthropomorphic sense myself, but I don't necessarily think that's what they are.
Okay. Carl.
In my personal, I'm just going to go off personal experience. My experiences with the deities has been more of a spiritual, ethereal type of experience. I believe it's very possible, and probably happens a lot more often than I realize, that they do present themselves in more of a physical aspect. Maybe not in some shining, obvious personification in the physical world, but probably more obscure, a little more hiding in plain sight. Again, this is more my personal experience. I do not speak for others. Yeah, I don't feel like there's a whole lot of limit to what how the deities can present themselves to us. I feel they get a lot more fun out of the ethereal spiritual side, because that I tend to notice that a lot more than the physical stuff.
Callan, your mic.
Yeah, don't let me forget to make that a t-shirt too when I do all those t-shirts, Ellie. Callan, your mic.
You're gonna have to beat Sticks and Stonehenge to it. That's our meme. Callan, I'm asking you to stay muted like everybody else when you're not talking. Thank you. All right, Wolf, it's your turn.
Ask me the question again. I want to make sure I have it right.
Do you believe the gods are physical, spiritual, etc., and how do you define them?
So, gosh, this is an Ocean video.
Yes, there's a video for that, and it's usually on Ocean's channel.
I'm like, how did I not have Ocean's avatar just ready for tonight? I'm just.
But I don't believe the gods are physical. Maybe they could have been. Maybe they can make themselves manifest physically. There are stories of Odin walking as the traveler. He's the wanderer, old one eye. There are stories of him doing that and interacting with people. But I don't personally believe that, they're walking the earth like Jesus did for 30 years or whatever, whether or not that's true. But I believe that they are disembodied minds. I believe they have powers that are sufficient to fulfill their being, that would define them as deity.
I believe Dylan specifically says like awesome powers or powers worthy of worship, basically so far beyond what humans can comprehend that it deems them to
Yeah,
be worthy of worship.
So that's so ambiguous, though. Like, I don't know. For me personally, the way they're described in the lore, it would take me hours and hours and hours, or a 8-minute ocean video to describe it to you. So I'm just going to defer to Ocean Keltoy, youtube.com/Ocean Keltoy, defining the gods. That's how I would do it.
All right. Callan, it's your turn.
So I pretty much hold the same view as Chris does. Maybe a tad bit more animistic, but yeah, I view the distinction between the spiritual and the material as pretty much needless. It's just as needless and somewhat incoherent. And that's, as for like what gods are themselves, I also adopt a little bit from Dylan's definition, but I'm a bit more flexible in that I allow also that the gods can physically manifest themselves.
Well, and there is mythological representation for a deity manifesting in Greek lore as well. But I hold to Dylan's definition. Dylan, if I recall correctly, actually leaned toward Hellenism, and a lot of the theology later on in his book that he starts to put down is from a Hellenistic perspective. So he defines them as bodiless minds with knowledge and power that would appear omnipotent or omniscient to humans because it is so far beyond what we can see and understand, that appear to want some sort of relationship with humanity because humanity across time has had experiences with these gods. So I very much hold to that view of how I define them. I don't believe that they're omnibenevolent. In fact, I also, and this is a big thing, I don't think the gods want every single person to know about them either. It's obvious from the way that they interact, at least to me, though I wouldn't deign to know the will of the gods, that's hubris. It's obvious from the way they seem to interact with humanity that some gods like some cultures or some people more than others and reveal themselves to some and not others, and that this is part of them being beings that have autonomy.
Just real
So
quick.
when people ask,
sorry. Go ahead.
So I say, when people ask me, why hasn't everyone had an experience with the gods? Well, you're assuming from a very Christian perspective that all of the gods want to be known by every person. And that's not the case. It doesn't seem to be anyway.
I was just going to jump in and ask, I'm assuming based on what you just said that therefore you wouldn't condemn me for not believing in your God. You wouldn't condemn me to hell for not believing in your God. You wouldn't look at me any differently for not believing in your God. Is that correct?
I mean,
Well,
you already know the answer to this question. My response to you when you asked me that the first time was good for you.
Yeah. I mean, I literally know
Well,
this because
I mean,
me and Allie talk every
for me-
single day. So.
From a human perspective, yeah, you're still going to hell. It's just not a bad thing.
From my perspective, it doesn't matter who you are. We're all going to Sheol. Doesn't matter who we are. Doesn't matter what we do.
Atheist, I think that's the defining difference. I mean, really, if you want to just pick one of all of them, it's that lack of condemnation, it's that lack of hell belief that really leads a lot of Christians to just condemning people. And I just hope that more atheists will come around to the fact that we need to stop condemning people and start looking at actions. But go ahead, yeah.
All right, so we have a very specific question, which I'm just going to take really quick because having all of us answer it would be kind of redundant because it's specifically regarding a person. Undead Meowth says, question for anyone to answer. One of my coworkers is an eclectic, and I'm just wondering what the basic beliefs of it are out of curiosity. So the answer is there aren't. basic beliefs. For eclecticism, a lot of eclectics start with some form of Wicca or ceremonial magic. That's usually how most people are introduced to paganism. And then there's a sort of smorgasbord approach that a lot of them take, where what feels right is how they practice and what they believe. So, like, eclectics don't really have a structured religion that a lot of them can talk about the way that we do. A lot of them have very personal sort of, I'm not being disrespectful by saying sort of a hodgepodge of different things, but that's really what a lot of eclectics end up with is, a number of different practices and beliefs. So a question specifically for Chris, which there's a misgender in, but there's an apology for it, so the person isn't necessarily in trouble. Do you believe that all faiths or religions should be constructively adjudicated when making truth claims, as a former atheist?
As in like, held to the same standards of criticism and everything.
Yeah, the person specifically said constructively.
Yeah, I would say so. Out of philosophical fairness and consistency, yeah.
All right. So the next one from the same person is actually a bit more broad, and that is, does paganism inform your daily social or family matters?
Yes. Why wouldn't it? Like, I interact as a pagan.
I will say it does, but in a very different way, because I am in the middle of a very fundamentalist area, which is nothing but Republican Trump voting fundamentalist Christians. So it does inform my social life. It informs me to be quiet.
I suppose that's fair. Carl.
Can you repeat the question again? Sorry about that.
Does paganism inform your social or daily family matters?
I haven't really informed my my kids aren't even really aware what I practice, but they're not really old enough to understand yet. My immediate family, I haven't really come out to them about this yet, because several branches of the family are, I have a branch of the family that's Pentecostal that would probably,
man, so sorry.
yeah, I could tell you stories another day, but things like that. So I have just kind of been keeping my family in the dark, and very much like Chris, just keeping quiet about it. In my social, particularly at work, I become more and more open about it. I openly do divination at my lunchtime at work, and it's actually gotten a lot of positive attention, to be honest. And I've even discovered that there's a few heathens at my work that like to hang out with me now. But I don't, aside from just doing what I do normally, I don't like kind of, I guess, get into everyone's face about what I do and what I am. And I just find that neutral balance, and it seems to be working out fine.
So if people are interested, you'll talk, but otherwise it's not really something that you bring up on your own, effectively.
More or less, yes. I mean, I wear some of my necklaces and pendants out, so if people recognize something, they'll usually come up to me about it. Otherwise, I don't particularly bring it up. No.
Wolf?
A little bit. I feel like the religion fit me, not I fit the religion, if that makes any sense.
Oh, it does. I said something very similar about coming home. A lot of pagans talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I mean, I feel like I gained a lot more confidence. If I'm going to be a little transparent, I feel like I gained a lot more confidence after I started practicing a little bit more aggressively. I'm not in the broom closet at all. I'm pretty open with everything. I have no problem talking to anybody about it. I'm pretty confident in my positions. Anybody can really come at me and ask me any kind of questions they want to. And as long as they do it in an honest and respectful way, I have no problem talking about whatever it is that they want to talk about. I'll answer any questions. My kids know, my family knows, the family that I still talk to. And They respect me as a person. Whether or not they respect the religion, I don't care. It's not. I'm not trying to convince anybody. Just as long as I don't get any disrespect, I'm fine. But yeah, I like I said, I'm my own person and I have my own personality. And if the religion were to disappear, I doubt that I would change at all. I would just maybe have a little bit more free time.
All right, and Callan.
Sorry, repeat the question.
So the question is, let me see. I have to find it again really quick because I had scrolled down to the next one. Fuck, where is it?
It
It's
was
all the way the heck back up here.
pretty much, does your ideology affect how you interact with your family, something like that?
Yeah, does it affect
Oh.
your daily social and family life?
Yeah, why wouldn't it? Like, I mean, it's not like, unless it's hampering your functionality, like as a human being, there really is no reason to draw that line.
So for me, I actually live in a home with two pagans and an agnostic. So I am a Hellenic Reconstructionist, as I've mentioned several times, but there is also a ceremonial magician, one of my partners who lives with us, who occasionally will participate in our rituals, and an agnostic, my husband, who lives with us, who will also occasionally participate in rituals. For example, when my rat died about a month ago, we did a full Hellenic burial, including things like honey cakes and pomegranates and the full ritual and feast afterwards with, words of loving, sending him off to the river Styx to cross. Including, coins in the box and such, because obviously there's not coins small enough for rat eyes, but, things of that nature. So I'm also very open because I live in a progressive area. So all of my friends and family know I'm pagan. The parts of my family that don't want to talk to me anymore because of that don't talk to me, and the rest just sort of shrug and, well, that's Allie. So I'm fortunate in the fact that my religion doesn't really cause a lot of conflict in my life. Most people are more curious and interested when they find out that I'm a Hellenist. But much like Carl, most people find out, say, when they come to my house or if they notice me wearing my labris, rather than me just like, blah, 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 Zedeus. So we have another actually fairly interesting question from the
Real
same
quick,
person.
can I pipe in on an answer for that?
Sure, go
Because
ahead.
my atheism does the same thing. Of course, like your worldview is going to define how you interact with the people around you. And I'm not calling my atheism a worldview. My worldview is secular humanism. But as an atheist, it has affected my family life. The Christians around me don't interact unless they're very progressive Christians. They do not interact with me. I've pretty much been shunned probably by 98% of my family, and I think that this is where atheists and pagans have a lot of common ground, is because I think that we do get stigmatized in a lot of the same ways by a sea of Christians around us. So yeah, I just wanted to pipe in and add that as an atheist, it has definitely affected my family life.
Well, and I just want to pipe in, given our answer to your question about the atheists earlier, we don't just get it from Christians and other, theists. We get it from atheists too. Like, I have a dear, dear friend who has spent now 3 years trying to convince me out of my faith. So like this sort of thing is something that definitely does affect you in the same way that holding any particular belief structure affects you. If you're a liberal in a family of conservative Christians, then you're going to get into some fights. So we actually have another interesting question from the same person, and then I'm going to move on to a couple of other people. But how has paganism led you to a more fulfilling life, and do you consider that to be the goal? Now, Chris is AFK at the moment, so I'm going to let her answer when she gets back. But so I'm going to start with Carl.
Well, first off, I didn't feel like I was, I guess the term would be sinful. Just for years being a Christian and also trying to just embrace who I am as a person. There's a lot of contradiction. I just felt bad for being me. And since turning to paganism, I feel great. I feel, I not only can I be myself, but I am encouraged by the gods to be the best me I can be, I guess is the one way to explain it. I
Yeah,
mean,
for sure.
yeah, Carnunos is probably the first deity I turned to, and in my faith, he's the god of balance, and he has helped me in every facet to bring balance to my life, and that's where I am now, and that's where I'm hoping to stay from now on. And yeah, that's nothing more to add to that.
All right, since Chris is back, we will ask her. How has, if it has at all, paganism contributed to a more fulfilling life for you? And do you believe that that is the goal of your practice?
I'll start with the second part first. Do I believe it's the goal of my practice? Not necessarily. I don't necessarily just go into this to have for myself a fulfilling life. I think it's for me. For just in general, that's just not the kind of life that I really want to live, anyways. Is that I don't want to live a life where I'm just constantly wanting to fulfill myself. In terms of has it helped me to have a more fulfilling life? Very much so, much more than anywhere else. Like when I was a Christian, I was constantly upset, and especially with myself and with God and with everyone else, because I was in such a fundamentalist crowd, and it was
Well, and then
very
there's the layer of guilt that comes with being mad at God, right?
yeah. Well, yeah. I was. It was there was a lot of self-loathing about it, and then also because of the sect I was in, which was very fundamentalist, six-day creationist, homophobic stuff, and I'm pan. There was a whole other level of self-hate, self-loathing. So, and then I'm also gender fluid, so.
I was about to say, you just came out as trans recently too, so like that's another layer on top of things.
Yeah. So yeah, all that is there a lot of self-loathing over that, and then I was very, very dissatisfied in the atheist community because I first started out as one of the edgelords, trying to just take down all religion because it's all evil, bad, etc., etc. And then I got my butt handed to me by Christians that actually knew what they were talking about, and by a bunch of other people. So I was very dissatisfied with myself then. And then I became dissatisfied again when I was just seeing how, and this isn't true of the whole atheist community or everyone involved in it, because there's a lot of good people in it, but just how toxic it was, and also how many people were turning on me, because especially like things over the historical Jesus issue alone, I was receiving quite literal harassment at my university over it. So it's
Wait, what?
yeah,
Really?
I was there were people reporting me to my professors over the mythicist issue because people were either trying to construe me as a mythicist or trying to make me into this weird fringe person. And so I ended up having to explain myself to tons of professors over it. So yeah, it's that all that mess is ridiculous, and I have had a much more fulfilling life being involved in paganism in my Canaanite faith.
That was fantastic answer. Thank you so much, Chris. Wolf, your turn.
Repeat the question so I know exactly how to answer.
So the question is, how has paganism led to a more fulfilling life for you, or has it? And do you believe that that is the point?
I'm going to answer like Chris. No, I don't think it's the point. of the religion, or I don't think it's the point of why I practice. But also, like Chris, absolutely yes, things feel more fulfilling. It's extremely liberating to go from Christianity, because I was a Christian forever. I grew up in an extremely Christian home. My grandfather was a Southern Baptist preacher. To go from that household and growing up in that lifestyle to go to something more freeing and liberating, paganism and heathenry specifically, where you don't have all these constricting things, you don't have you know these people judging you constantly and all that stuff. The pagan community can be extremely inviting, extremely friendly, not in the weird way Christians can be friendly. There are some great Christians out there. I know I've kind of shit on Christianity in this stream. Some of my greatest friends, especially at work, are Christians. They're great people. They are good people. I have nothing wrong with Christians. Don't think that. I have things wrong with Christianity. There is an extremely big difference, although it sounds really small. But yeah. So yes, it has impacted my life greatly, and I feel significantly more fulfilled knowing that I've got this pagan community to turn to, and these feelings make sense, and it's not wrapped up in all of these constant incoherent problems and mixed in with awful bigotry baggage and stuff like that.
Thank you so much. Callan, your turn.
Wait, there's something else other than paganism?
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
you're the only one here that specifically grew up pagan. Lucky.
Is this the point of pagan? No. I mean, not. It's the goal is fulfillment insofar as anything is the goal of fulfillment, really. Like, I'm trying to. The question's also kind of weirded a little weirdly. Can you repeat it again? Maybe I misheard it.
So the question was, has paganism enhanced your life, and do you believe that that is the point of it?
No, it's not the point of it. I guess it's hard for me to articulate it. It would be in the same vein as what Chris and Ulfer said. As for whether it's enhanced my life or not, I'm going to say sure, yeah, totally. Not that I have anything else to compare it to.
Well, I grew up very fundamentalist Christian, much like Wolf and Chris said that they did, and Carl, it sounds like too. And Naka, for that matter. So, like, comparatively, I would say that yes, it is a massive improvement. I would say that the point of my particular branch of paganism, as I understand it, the point of my own practice, is to get closer to my gods. And I believe that that enhances my life in the same way that any healthy relationship would, right? Like when you find somebody that you fall in love with and you have a healthy relationship with them, that enhances your life. When you have a very close friend that you can heavily rely on, that you know you can trust, that reciprocity enhances your life. My relationship with the gods is much the same way. So I would say that it has given me a calming practice. It has given me, when there's no friend that I can turn to and I feel like I'm about to break down, like going to the gods and putting my problems on the altar and trusting them to help me find the way to get through it, not to solve the problem for me in the way that many people sometimes talk about it, but to help me find the right path. That I would say is a way that it has enhanced my life. Also, ritual practice of any kind is actually shown to be beneficial to the human brain. So the daily ritual practice that I do does have cognitive benefits as per research, whether the gods are involved or not. So I would say to a certain degree, yes, my pagan practice is meant to enhance my life, but in the same way that any relationship or practice should. Like if you are knitting, that enhances your life. If you're drawing, that enhances your life if you enjoy it. Like I think the way that question is worded is a bit strange. Here's a question that's a bit more broad that I feel I can answer on my own. Most, if not all of you, mention including the head god of your pantheons among the gods that you worship. Do any pagans not include the head god in their worship, worshiping the other gods? The answer to that question is yes. There are some people who just worship, say, patron deities or only feel called to one or two. There are also eclectics who worship and pick and choose the gods that they either, in their words, work with when it comes to magical practice or worship. Chris actually mentioned not worshiping one of the higher gods in her pantheon, also because of conflicts that she perceives in the mythology. So, yes, there are pagans who don't worship some of the higher gods in their pantheons for one reason or another.
Yeah, real quick, because I am a little bit syncretistic also, when it comes to the South Arabian pantheon, I don't worship the highest gods of their pantheons. I don't worship Wad or or Anbe.
So there you go. That is
Also, who the high god is can change. Like, I'm stepping a little bit outside the Sumerian role here, but in heathenry, for example, some people consider Odin to be the chief god. Others consider Tyr to be the chief god. And historically speaking, there's evidence that Uller was the chief god in some areas. So it really depends on the tradition.
Yeah, and in Phoenicia, there was a shift from El as being their high god to Baal Shemen.
Well, and in Greek practice, some people believe that Hecate ceded her seat among the Dodecatheon to Dionysos, which effectively is to say that she stepped down as one of the 12 high gods for Dionysos, according to some traditions. There are a lot of people that disagree. There's only a couple of scholars that put this idea forward, but that counts among the do you worship one of, those gods or not kind of thing, because some people don't honor Dionysos. So this question from Brack, I actually think is very interesting. I noticed Ocean answered in the chat, but I want to give our panelists a chance to answer here too. Why the Reconstructionist path instead of one such as Hinduism, which has had continuity? I think we've partially answered this, so I don't know if all of us have to get too in-depth, but Chris, we'll start with you.
For me, it's a big part of why I'm doing Reconstructionism is just because that's where I feel very called to, especially because I have such an investment already in history. It just, from a point of calling, I feel like that is where the gods have called me to go, is to try and get into working at.
And Chris has joined our robot overlords. Take a deep breath for a sec. Please repeat yourself, Chicky. We didn't hear you.
Am I back now?
Yep, you're back now.
Okay. Basically, it's because with my gods, I feel that I've been called to do Reconstructionism because it's something that I'm already extremely invested in, just as an academic person. So it's something I already have the access to, and at the same time, I feel like I have been called to try and bring back something that has been completely lost in a way. And I think it's actually a big thing that's really especially mine in mythology, because I think it's something that's really missing from the modern world. Even if you're a non-believer, I believe that mythology is a very important thing, and it's something that the modern world has.
No, mute your mic, buddy. Your sound is killing Chris's audio.
Oh, sorry.
I got it. I muted him.
Okay.
He can unmute himself if I mute him. That's one of the things I love about Zoom is if I mute one of y'all because you forgot to, then you can unmute yourself.
So yeah, it is something in Reconstructionism. Even if I was not going to be a Reconstructionist pagan, I would still want to be involved in reconstructing the faith anyways, even if that wasn't my standard practice. And it's because I think that there's just something that's been lost in modern society by it trying to push myth away at arm's length. Like, it's so strange that even Christianity doesn't want to have it wants to keep the term myth at arm's length and misses the beauty of what myth is. And I think that Reconstructionism is something that where we can bring that back in a positive way.
Thank you. That was a very eloquent answer. Carl, your answer to that question. We're only going to be doing, I think, 2 more questions. One of them is a request for where to find more information, which will be the last one. The other one, I think, is going to be a pretty quick answer from maybe a couple of us, and that is the super chat that just popped up from Sarah Pease herself. So go ahead, Carl. Do you recall the question?
Just repeat it, just so I'm clear.
Okay, so the question is, why did you feel like called to a Reconstructionist path as opposed to following an existing pagan religion that is still alive today from antiquity, like Hinduism?
I think along the similar lines as Chris, just a calling to it. And like I said, way in the beginning, I have no evidence to say that I am a Gaulish descendant, but I feel that there may be some ancestral roots there. So I feel not obligated, not the right word, but it's a duty, a service I want to provide to my ancestors to bring this way of life, this old custom back from the brink of extinction, which it was gone. It was off the face of the earth for a while. The Romans came out and just wiped it off the face of the earth for way too long. And I want to do everything I can to bring it back. So many people know Irish mythology, Scottish mythology, Welsh. This is something that there's so little on it, and I want to help as much as I can to revive it, to bring it back, because there's just so much beauty to it, and I've such a powerful connection to the Gaulish gods and to my Gaulish ancestors that I feel I owe it to them to try to bring it back.
Okay, Wolf.
Repeat the question.
The question is, why a reconstructed ancient religion versus a surviving pagan religion from antiquity, such as Hinduism?
So it's really interesting because pretty much every single polytheist who converts away all says the exact same thing, almost word for word, without knowing each other. And it's, I felt the calling to walk the old path. It's almost word for word every single time. And I think there's something there. But yeah, I mean, that's really it. I felt like I was being pulled in a certain direction, and so I decided, why not? I'll take a look at it. And the further I walked, the more it made sense. And I kept trying to double check on it. I kept trying to, I tried to figure it out in one way or another, and I keep coming back to it. I actually see Ocean said in the chat, I feel like if I left heathenry, I wouldn't be gone long. Yeah, I mean, that's basically it. Even if you took like the God belief away, there's still a whole lot of ritualistic practice that I enjoy, and I feel like I get a lot out of when it comes to venerating ancestors, giving them respect, and trying to remember them and communicate with them, whether it be in a spiritual sense or not. I feel like there's just a whole lot there. So, yeah.
Callan.
So I guess kind of the nice thing about polytheism is that, like, saying that why don't I go and practice Hinduism, it's kind of in its own way a little bit, it's like, how do I describe this? Like, for example, if I wanted to, I could go right now to a Hindu temple and I can pay homage to their gods and and have absolutely no problem with that. So, in other words, the reason why I do what I do, aside from like the reasons that Chris and Wolfer have mentioned is that I don't see one. I feel the calling, and two, I don't see any reason to ignore said calling. It's like basically I can have my cake and eat it. Would be a good summary of it. Like, yeah.
Alrighty, I
Well,
wanted
no.
to make sure you weren't pausing for a second because it sounded like there might have been an end to that statement. My apologies for letting it
You're
hang.
fine.
So I'm going to answer very similarly and sort of speak a little bit to what we keep talking about, this idea of coming home. When I was very young, I read a book called The Egypt Game. It was part of school. I don't know if people here have read it, but it's about these kids who, like, in the back of an antique store, find a bunch of boxes of stuff that have to do with ancient Egyptian things, and they start like reconstructing these ancient Egyptian rituals and have this like toy doll game that they play on top of it. And at one point, they end up doing a ritual and making an offering, and like something happens as a result of it. And I remember after reading that, this sense of wishing that there were these grand temples like what they were imagining that you could still walk into and feel the awe and the presence of deity walking alongside you. And this was still when I was a Christian, so I hated myself for this. But I think paganism started for me when I prayed to one of those gods and my prayer was answered, which I had never felt happened with Yahweh. So when it comes to the Reconstructionist tradition, the reason that I don't feel like I picked my faith, and it doesn't really seem like anybody else here does either, all of us felt that pull. So it's not as though we preferred it per se, at least the folks on this panel, and anybody can pop in here and tell me to shut up if I'm wrong. It's we felt that call, either from a vision or a personal experience or just that pull that some people describe. There's this sense that this is where I belong, and it's a sense of peace that doesn't exist when trying to practice another faith or no faith at all. And it's nearly impossible to describe when you're not practicing it, but it's something I've heard over and over again from every pagan I've ever talked to. And oftentimes, people like to excuse this as being a factor of pagan literature. Oftentimes, before they've ever been exposed to pagan literature, just being in the presence of a ritual circle or in the presence of others who have a similar inclination can give you that sense of this is where I belong, and it goes so deep into your core that it's nearly impossible to articulate.
I'll never forget the first time I walked into a Vey, which is a ritual space, a hallowed ritual space. It was the most incredible thing that has happened to me spiritually in my life. It was probably one of the bigger impacts when I walked in. It felt like I was punched in the chest in a good way, if that makes any sense at all.
Mm-hmm.
It was incredible and awe-inspiring. It was just insane.
So, Sarah Pease herself.
Real quick
Go ahead.
before you move on, Ali, I just wanted to comment on this whole Hinduism thing. Had there been a true Hindu in the room tonight, a lot of the conversation would have been dominated by myself because I have deep-rooted issues with the caste system, social economic effects of the caste system. So I'm really glad that there wasn't a Hindu in the conversation tonight.
Well, so do the Hindus.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. So I mean,
like
Yeah,
the Buck Tea movement is specifically against the caste system.
yeah. Well, depending on pretty much who you talk to, but I'm glad I do want to start covering Hinduism. Because there's a lot of aspects to it that I actually like, and then there's the caste system. So, yeah, I just wanted to put that in there, that had a Hindu polytheist been in the conversation tonight, I would have at least brought up the caste system, and as far as I know, not a single person here believes in such a system, right?
No, none of us do. We call people who have that sort of belief folkists in our community frequently. And none of us really like that.
Nope.
Because the caste system is based entirely on skin tone, pretty much, and a series of bits of mythology that relate to that. For anybody who's not familiar with
Yeah,
it.
and that's a whole nother
Yeah, although in
stream.
India it's
And just to
a
kind of,
little
sorry
more
to
insidious.
point out something Ocean is saying in the chat. Yeah, I totally agree. It depends on the Hindu you're talking to. But
It really
yeah,
does. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Callan.
the caste system in India is a little bit more insidious because it has to do directly with birth and whatnot, but that's a whole other topic, and one that's probably better addressed by a an Indian, although I know quite a bit about it as well.
Or even a Bangladeshi, because they have Hindu hegemony there as well.
Yeah, preferably by a Dalit.
So this is something from Sarah Pease herself. So these are going to be the last two questions before Naka's final statement and questions, because we have gone a bit long. A paper recently tested and refuted the Catholic transubstantiation claim by David Marsick. Is there a similar paper or test for the veracity of polytheist rituals? So I have a problem with this question, and that is that it claims that we are sitting here making a truth claim about our rituals, which I have a problem with. Transubstantiation claims that the ritual that is performed physically transforms wine and bread into body and blood of Christ. And like pagans as a whole don't tend to make truth claims about our rituals in this way. So like you can't scientifically test the will of the gods because they're independent beings with their own autonomy. That's kind of a silly idea.
Yeah, mine are completely true down to the letter, 100%. Here's my dogma.
But I mean, in all seriousness, like I don't know if anybody else wants to pipe in on this one, but this question is
Sure, I will.
from a very Christian framework, and that's my problem
So,
with it, because it's almost impossible to answer as a pagan.
Yeah, so I can. So first of all, whatever paper that is like really stupid, because anyone who goes through that kind of ritual can clearly see that the wine doesn't literally turn into blood. You don't need a scientific study for that. And two, it really screws up the domain between spirituality and science, because none of us make those kinds of claims. And really, it just feels like a got you, or an attempted got you, which is really, really weak.
Well, again, it's very difficult to try to answer that sort of question from a pagan perspective, because what we're doing with our rituals doesn't have any of those transformative aspects. When you make an offering, you don't, like most of us don't believe it physically belongs to the gods. In fact, from what I understand, most of us don't believe that the gods need those offerings in the first place. There's the concept of reciprocity. We give and gifts are given back, but that is a willing and consensual thing, in the same way that you cannot scientifically test whether your friend is going to buy you a watch or not. Anytime you want to say, if you give them a gift, you can't scientifically test whether every single, human being ever will automatically give you one back per se, because there's an element of free will, so to speak, involved there. So too it is with the gods.
Yeah, there's a reason we call it a sacrifice. Or an offering. It's not something that's, this is not a communion or esque aspect where any of our offerings or anything like that are being transformed from this physical to this spiritual form or whatever like that. It's a chance for us to give something to the gods and them perhaps receive it if they wish to.
So Carl just put in the chat really quick that he needs to get going pretty soon. So I want to give him a chance to give his take on this question if he wants to, and then I'm going to ask the final one to him specifically so he can weigh in on that question before he gets going. So do you have anything to say on this particular topic?
No, I think Chris covered it pretty well, and you as well. I really have nothing else to add to that one. Yeah.
So here, Naka, I'm gonna mute you again real quick. Carl, so the last question is, what are some books, websites, podcasts, or YouTube channels that you can suggest for people to learn more about your religion, be it mythology, theology, praxis, etc.?
Oh boy. Well, Gaulish is kind of harder to come by. As far as books go, if you go on Amazon and it's called Ancient Fire: An Introduction to Gaulish Polytheism. Um, Websites would definitely be the trying to remember the name of it. I could probably send you some links later. I just can't remember them off the top of my head. A definitely good source about Gaulish polytheism is there's a Gaul chat on Discord. Is a great place to learn about it. Celtic paganism, just in general. Druidcast is a great podcast for that. There's you just type in Celtic in on iTunes podcast, and a bunch of stuff will come up. Various books. For Druidry, Penny Billington has got a good book on that. That was a great way for me to start on my path. That's all I have for now. Yeah.
I want to pipe in real quick because I was just watching a documentary on Hannibal of Carthage, and just a little aside, one of the things that they said, because they were talking about how the Roman Empire really solidified itself, and that was that the Gauls were the longest that resisted the Romans, and when they finally dominated the Gaul culture, and as you said, pretty much wiped them out. That's when the Roman Empire really became the Roman Empire and started to expand. And I just found it interesting when I was watching that documentary earlier, and now I have somebody that is literally trying to reconstruct that religion, that they were the people that gave the Romans the hardest time and just never gave up until eventually the Romans just dominated them.
Yeah, I mean, like another. Speaking of documentary, sorry to cut you off. If you go on Netflix, there's a show called Empire Games. They have a whole episode on the Celts, which is a great source of information on that. I've just started reading Julius Caesar's The Conquest of Gaul, which I'll be honest, I can already feel that it's pretty biased because it's in Caesar's opinion. But yeah, the Gauls definitely, they fought tooth and nail to the bitter end.
Yeah.
I mean, their religion was I guess priests would be the best word, would be the Druids themselves. I mean, the Druids incited revolt so much and so hard that the Romans hunted them down. And like the Druids, they weren't like, they didn't just pray for help. They fought back. I believe
part of the reason that All Hallows Eve and Samhain still exist as traditions is because of just how stubborn the Celts were holding on to their holiday traditions. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. I believe there's a Gaulish version of Samhain that I cannot pronounce, and so I'm not even going to try.
No, you nailed it. That's it. Samhain.
Oh, that's it. I think there's more. That's the Gaelic way to pronounce it, but I think there's a Gaulish version as well. But I could be wrong.
There's also, May Day is a bastardization of Beltane. There's a lot of Celtic traditions that were actually carried over. The solstices and equinox had some traditions, and a lot of Yule traditions also were brought over.
So go ahead and finish what you were saying there, Grim.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the Druids were found across the Celtic landscape from Ireland all the way to Gaul. So even though Gaul was essentially driven to extinction or through absorption into the Roman culture, a lot of those traditions moved north and I think survived that way. That's definitely another reason why I'm heavily into reconstructing the Gaulish way. Simone. Sorry, Chingetto just messaged me. It's Simone is the Gaulish word.
So you also mentioned earlier the name of a podcast. For anybody who missed it, do you mind repeating the podcast you said kind of helped get you into Druidry and Celtic Reconstructionism?
Yes, it's called Druidcast. It's a podcast that's uh, it's uh, uh, it's from the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids, which is the largest Druid organization out there, and it's just a great source of information, not just for Irish polytheism, but just Celtic, and they talk to other experts too. It's not all Celtic, but yeah, that's definitely the podcast that started sucking me into it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I know you said you had to head out pretty soon, so if you want to stick around for a little bit longer for the after show, you're welcome to. Otherwise, thank you so much for being with us for the first time. When you get your YouTube channel started in the future, please let us know so we can give you a big promotion on both Sticks and Stonehenge and over here on Nakasuchi's channel. You've been an amazing guest, and I'm so glad to have had you. Thank you, Kengetto, Mr. Lurking in the chat, for having introduced us to Carl. I have a feeling this is going to be the start of a wonderful friendship.
Well, it was an honor to be here, and thank you very much. And sorry, I'm a little scatterbrained at time. I was definitely nervous doing this, but it was an honor to meet you guys and talk to you.
Yeah, see ya.
All right, have a good one.
Yeah, I appreciate you
See ya.
coming on, and it was really nice to meet you. And yeah, I'm looking forward to future conversations.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. With all you
Good
guys.
hanging out,
All right.
man.
Take care, everyone.
All right, so Chris, books, podcasts, websites, etc., where people can find out more information about your particular path. Yours is a bit more challenging because there's not quite as many Canaanites out there.
No, unfortunately, if you're going to get into this, you're going to have to really realize that, especially over in the Americas and Europe, there are virtually no Canaanite polytheists. There are several groups starting up around Israel and in the Middle East. But if you are interested, there are some people in North America who have actually done some touring and helping to start stuff up. I recommend Tess Dawson's work. Dawson has 2 books out. One is called The Horned Altar, Rediscovering and Rekindling Canaanite Magic. And the other one is Whisper of Stone, Natib Kadesh, Modern Canaanite Religion. I highly recommend both of those. They're excellent books. I have them on PDF. And for those really wanting to dive deeper, I suggest there are 3 books here I suggest. Ugaritic Narrative Poetry, edited by Simon Parker. It is at relatively cheap. I got my copy for $8. A Ritual and Cult at Ugarit by Dennis Pardee. This is a book specifically all on the ritual and cultic religion at Ugarit, and this is the only major documentation we have of Canaanite ritual. So it in my opinion, it is rather essential. It is unfortunately a bit more pricey, usually around $20 to $30 or so. And then this one's also around that same range. Rank Among the Canaanite Gods, El Baal and the Raphaim, by C.E.L. Lehoiru. So yeah.
So thank you so much, Chris. And this is just a side note. There is a book on miasma that is going to cost me over $110 because it was University Press and a limited run. So I feel your pain with getting your hands on specifically scholarly texts for your Reconstructionism, which, this is a reminder to everyone in the chat, we're going to be doing a stream on SNS on the topic of getting into Reconstructionism because we've had lots and lots of questions towards that tonight. We're also going to be planning a stream on our various afterlives, where we're going to be doing a deep dive into the afterlives of the various traditions for the SNS hosts. Chris, if you want to come for that one, that you would be more than welcome, considering you've talked a little bit about Sheol tonight. But the Reconstructionism, paganism comes with homework. it's not a religion that you go and sit in a pew and stare off into space for. There's a lot of work that goes into becoming a pagan, which is one of the reasons why we don't proselytize, because like there's homework that comes with it. We wouldn't inflict that on someone who didn't feel the need to be, to be
Yeah.
called and worship our gods.
Yeah, for me, because I syncretized with the South Arabian religion, that is one of the most difficult religions to actually find content on. And if you're not familiar with German and French, you're not going to really get that far. That being said, I am more than willing to help people out with resources because I have a ton of all digital. I am more than willing to help people out with resources. You can contact me on Discord and on Twitter. And I am more than willing to try and help get resources for you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris. And like Chris, I'm going to stick up for her very heavily here. Chris helped me prep for a debate that never happened and one that did. She is a fantastic resource for biblical history. And she is a fantastic resource for talking about Canaanite Reconstructionism and even some Indo-European, like Proto-Indo-European stuff. She's extremely knowledgeable and she's very, very friendly. She's a wonderful person to know. I know that if you guys have respectful questions, she's a great person to ask.
Thank you. Real quick, there is one book that if people want to get into South Arabian religion, it's something that like people would absolutely need to a degree, but 99% of people will never be able to get their hands on it because so few copies exist. So I'm more than willing to help out with it. It's Les Noms Propres Sud-Arabe Antiques Semitiques. It's an extremely rare book, only printed in 1934. But it's like one of the only monographs on proper names in ancient Arabia. And that's basically one of the only sources that we have for their religion. I'm more than willing to help dive through this for you and translate for you because it's in French, and more than willing to do that. So all you gotta do is just reach out.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. Wolf, your turn.
So, Undead Meowth in the chat says, anybody asks Wolf a question, and he says, repeat the question. So, repeat the question.
What are some books, websites, podcasts, etc. that you could recommend for people who are interested in getting into heathenry / Norse Reconstructionism, like your pagan starter pack for your faith?
World Full of Gods and a
fantastic
case for
book.
Yeah, a case for polytheism. I'm really bad with book names. I wasn't prepared for this question, so I didn't bring a list prepared. I can see somebody saving me right now. They're typing to me. If you really want to get into it, I've got a good Google Drive link that if somebody actually really does want to get in touch with me, you can find me on Discord under Wolf the Red, and in most of the polytheistic servers like Noka server or Oceans, or I also help Ocean run
Ocean says go to the hold reading list.
Yeah, if you're in the hold, go to the hold reading list. If you're not in the hold, sorry, I can't help you with that. But you can check out Mead Hall, and I'm more than willing to take you on and help throw stuff at you. Singetto also has his own server, and there's a nice reading list there. But yeah, so there are hundreds and hundreds of books. But honestly, where I found most of my knowledge is talking with polytheists who've been doing this their entire lives, and they're up in their 30s and 40s and 50s. And I sit around fires and just pick their brains and ask questions and spend 6 or 7 hours until 3 and 4 and 5 in the morning just talking, not doing anything else, just talking. And I've just learned so much, luckily, from the mouths of people who've dedicated their entire lives to this, scholars who have degrees and have just dedicated every ounce of themselves to learning as much as they can about reconstructed heathenry.
Okay. Callan, specifically Sumerian Reconstructionism, what are some resources that people can look into? Books, websites, podcasts, etc.
Oh, that means I actually have to answer in English, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
Okay, so quite a bit of a number of resources are actually in German. Yeah, the Germans they kind of left a footprint in archaeology, just to say.
Dominate everything.
Yeah, they really do. That's why
Especially
German's such a nice language to
East
know.
in general, they have the market a little cornered.
A little more than cornered. It's more like a monopoly, but yeah. So for Sumerian stuff, there's The Sumerians by Samuel Noah Kramer. Yeah, it's old. There's newer material, but this is the easiest to find. There's also, if you're really sadistic to yourself and really want to dive into it, I would recommend it personally, but I'm biased. Oh yeah, that's a good one too.
Yeah, Chris held up the book The Harps That Want.
Yeah.
Yeah, by Thorkild Jacobson, Sumerian Poetry and Translation.
That's a really good book.
Yeah, it's more current than Kramer's translations.
Also,
definitely.
Ocean in the chat brings up the YouTube channel Digital Hammurabi. They go over Sumerian history.
I know. I was about to use them as a source after I said. There's also, if you really wanted to go into it, you can do Introduction to Sumerian Grammar by Daniel A. Foxvolk. But yeah, Digital Hammurabi is also another really good source.
And Dr. Josh is working on an introductory grammar for Sumerian as well, which is
much needed.
Yes. So
because the grammars that are out right now are highly technical and hard to work through.
Yeah. So you who are entering Sumerian have that to look forward to.
As well as cuneiform, and not Ugaritic cuneiform, which is a nice, like, tame alphabet in some ways. No. This is logograms. This is logogram writing style.
Hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of signs that you have to memorize.
And one of these, and even just one of the, and not all of them are even pronounced. Some are used just simply as classifiers.
Yeah, like Dinger.
Dinger, yep. Dinger, Key, that's a huge one. So like Inanna Key would be the city of Inanna rather than Inanna Dinger. Yep. So yeah, if you're really sadistic, come and enjoy and join on this rewarding path with me. Because everyone loves verbal chains. I know you all do. You just don't know it yet.
Okay. So, like in my case, there is a lot of sources. There are good ones and there are bad ones. So, I actually have in the hold, if you're a part of the hold, there is a there's the Baby Pagan starter pack for Hellenism that I created. It is a PDF with over 50 different books organized by whether they are scholarly works on the history of Greece and the history and evolution of Greek religion, versus modern day prayer books, ancient direct sources, or modern day praxis books. So a few notables from that is if you're looking specifically for practice, I highly recommend Hellenic Polytheism Household Worship by Labris, the Labris Group. You can get it on Amazon for about $12, I think, for the paperback. It is extremely concise, includes the Attic calendar, talks about the holy days, and has a number of rituals for various parts for life. And it also talks about the way that like these various rituals can be modified and how to insert prayers and such. Hearthstone has a number of prayer books that they have put out for modern Greek polytheists. So if you're looking at prayer structure, that's another place to look. Obviously, the Iliad, the Odyssey, and for some folks, the poetry of Sappho may be very interesting and informative. There is also the Theogony and Working Days, which, Working Days is Hesiod. Theogony is, it's getting to that time of the night where I'm going to start losing track of my brain. I want to say it might have been Plato's Theogony. So if you're looking at modern day Neoplatonists, Edward Butler and Stephen Dillon are both fantastic resources for that. They both have excellent essay collections you can get for relatively cheap on Amazon. There's lots and lots of written stuff out there for the aspiring Hellenist. There's also the website Theoi, THEOI.com. It has very, very good definitions of the gods, and it also has information on offerings and stuff. There is also HellenicFaith.com, which is run, if I recall correctly, by my good friend Claytonus. And he has a lot of resources on Neoplatonism, on offerings, on ritual structure, on praxis, and on virtue ethics. So his website is another really fantastic resource. So if you guys are interested, there is that PDF. If there's enough people interested, post at me in the Discord, and I will put it in Naka's Discord as well, because it's a free resource for anybody. If you want to learn more about Hellenism, then there's lots of stuff out there for you. So this is the time where we let our guests shill out their channels. Wolf and Kellen and I are actually all a part of Sticks and Stonehenge, and I've mentioned multiple times some cool streams that are coming down the line. So if you guys want to hear a bunch of pagans from different POVs, much like tonight's streams, taking questions, talking about topics, politics, and religion from our unique perspectives, we put out a stream just about every week, and we're working on edited content. Kingetto, who referred our lovely Celtic polytheist for the panel tonight, put out an excellent video on Samhain. If you haven't checked that out, you are really missing out. We're working on a series of response videos to spirit science, because all of us have some problem with them in some way or another, and it's kind of a group effort to try to deal with them. We are also each working on our own introductions to our various Reconstructionist practices. I'm working on one for Hellenism. Kingetto is in a process of doing a holiday series and one for Celtic polytheism. And Callan is working on one for heathenry and for a little bit for Sumerian polytheism.
I'm working on one for Canaanite religion as well.
Yes, and we have talked a little bit about collaborating with Chris for Canaanite stuff as well, because the point of Sticks and Stonehenge is the vast array of experiences that we all have. So, Wolf, I don't remember.
As well as to centralize an area for people who want to actually explore our faiths.
Yes.
That's the other purpose.
We want to create a safe spot where you can ask us questions. We take questions at the end of every stream, so long as they're on topic. Wolf, if I recall correctly, you've got some projects of your own that you're working on as well, both for us and for yourself.
Yeah, so I actually do a weekly podcast. Our podcast broke into the top 25% of all podcasts of all time, if only because of attrition, where most podcasts fall off over a certain amount of time. We broke into that top 25%. We put a podcast out every week. We are called Westbind, and that is westbind.podbean.com, I want to say. You can also find us on Facebook, where we stream every Wednesday, and then you can check us out on iTunes, Google Play, or I guess Google Podcast, Podbean, and Spotify, and there's a couple others.
There's links to both Wolf's podcast and Sticks and Stonehenge in the description for anybody who wants to check those out.
Yeah, but yeah, so those episodes come out on audio on Fridays, so you can always be sure that there is going to be an episode out every week. We haven't missed a week yet. We're extremely militant about it, but we cut up. We are just completely ridiculous. It's me and three of my buddies. They don't have anything to do with paganism at all. It's just we all realized that we made each other laugh. We started putting out episodes. It got really big. We get a couple thousand views on every episode now by the end of the week. So we have a lot of fun with it. Each week is a different topic. It can be anything from we did like badasses through history all the way to we did a bunch of spooky stuff for Halloween. But anyways, we have a really good time with it. So if you want to check that out, definitely do it. That's westbind.podbean.com or just on Facebook, look for Westbind.
And you
And
said you're
then,
also working on your own channel, right? Kind of talking about like daily life stuff for being a heathen.
yeah, so like my big perspective is I'm a dad, and I mentioned that earlier. I love my kids, I love my wife. I'm really excited with the life that I have. I know there's a lot of guys out there who are like, "Oh my god, I'm so strapped down" or whatever. No, this is what I was born to do. I freaking love it. I have a great time, and heathenry and positive masculinity. I'm like all about it. I mean, I've got this big beard. I've got tattoos. I've got long hair. I ride a motorcycle. I'm a fucking Viking and all this stuff.
You have
But
Viking
also,
armor.
yeah, I've got a full suit of armor. But I also I'm an ordained Gothi. I perform weddings for atheists and pagans. I'm raising 2 daughters. I've got a son on the way, and so I'm just trying to make the world a better place, despite looking and exuding this like extremely masculine presence. I can also prove to you that just because I look like this certain way, can be this like soft and caring dude who just wants to help people and make the world a better place. So I'm trying to make content about that. Uh, and I've got the infrastructure set up. I've got the YouTube channel. I've got the email. I've got the Twitter handle. I've got the friends and the small following here and there. I know if I would just put out one video, it would at least get a few views. I just got to sit down and record the video. So it's all it's waiting on is me to just do it.
All right, and Chris, I know that you took a pretty long break from YouTube for a little while. Do you have any projects or appearances coming up that you would like to talk about?
I don't really have any appearances. Most of the stuff that I do is typically a little off the cuff. I'm pretty much well removed from the YouTube scene, as it were.
Oh, you're very much behind the scenes. Again, I mentioned that you helped me prep for my debates and stuff. Like
There-
you're a friend to all of us.
Yeah, like you will see my name popping up around. I review inspiring philosophies videos quite a bit now. Michael and I have a lot of back and forth, and I do a lot of pre-review of his Genesis series right now in particular, and have been also helping him with his Dying and Rising God series and the whole Jesus mythicism stuff. I do run my own Discord. It is it let me grab the name here. It is called Ancient Near East and Biblical Discussion, and we limit it specifically to that. It's no offense to anyone else, but I have been on so many Discords where we get in, where if we even allow New Testament, it explodes, and I'm also trying to avoid all the mythicism stuff on there as well. I'm sick of that debate.
What? Why hasn't that movement died? I don't understand.
I don't either, but it's I'm sick of that debate. So we do limit it specifically to that. It is not a religious Discord either. It is specifically devoted to academic study. So you can also find tons of resources on there because I usually file dump on there quite extensively. I specifically actually bought a Discord membership just so I could throw on things over 20 megabytes on there. So like you'll find like PDFs of dissertations from like back in the 60s and stuff at random. Like other than that, I don't really do a whole lot. I do have a Twitter as well. You guys can follow me on there. When I'm on there, I'm usually just losing my mind on someone who's being insane. Twitter.
I mean, that's
You
Twitter
and-
for you. So, Naka, do you want me to do the reminder announcement that I need challengers because people apparently are too scared to fight me, like, in the next couple of weeks, which is why we're having a different stream on Thursday? Or, like, do you want me to do that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you can, but we really got to close out.
You're fading.
I can't even show on Discord tonight. I've got to go to bed.
Alrighty. Well, this one did run a bit long, but that's the nature of having 5 panelists on a topic this in depth. So I want to thank the live chat for all of your guys' questions. I know we didn't get to every single one of them, but that's the nature of time. And we actually went over an hour and a half longer than we expected to, just so we could get to chat questions. If I skipped out over a question, chances are either I felt it was answered in the early part of the stream, it was the repeat of another question, just slightly rephrased, or I felt that the question was like it was badly phrased, like either rudely or something along those lines. So if you got missed, or we ran out of time. So if you got missed or you felt like some of your questions weren't answered, again, it was a function of both time and the information that was already presented. If you go back and you weren't here from the beginning, there were a number of things that we answered right at the beginning to give you guys all a basis for our beliefs, including questions about afterlives and such. So I'm hoping that we might be able to do another Ask a Pagan type stream about this, where we can get more in depth into other topics. But that's also part of where SNS, as another plug, comes in, because we go in depth about very specific pagan topics from multiple perspectives nearly every week. So it is well worth coming and checking out some of our stuff. A lot of answers to a lot of your guys' questions are on there in our various live streams and in the edited videos. So, closing out, I still need 4 people who want to get into a fight with me. I am doing a me versus the room. This seems to be something a lot of people are excited about, and we need volunteers for anybody who's ever accused me or of being unwilling to go into a debate. Like, here is your chance to show down.
All right, I will, Allie, I will challenge you on you getting a snake.
Ugh, Callan.
I'm with Allie. I can't do snakes.
So, if any of you guys, atheist, Christian, if for some reason a pagan's got a beef with something that I've said on one of my streams or whatever, we're taking 4 people. Naka's not a mod. It's going to be a dumpster fire. I am loving it. I want to get into this debate. I know that some folks in the community don't quite understand why it is I want to do this. It's for fun, to be honest. Like, I want to have this discussion. I'm happy to be called out on my stuff. I'm also quite happy to put to bed a lot of the misconceptions around, particularly my branch's beliefs, because I won't claim to speak for all pagans, and neither will anybody on this panel. So, thank you all again for tuning in with us. We had a pretty steady viewership throughout the whole night. This was amazing. I really enjoyed it. Thank you, everybody, for coming here and for volunteering. I will pass it off to Nock for his final statements.
Yeah, I want to reiterate. I've had a lot of atheists that have contacted me through email or private DMs to talk some smack about Allie, and you have your chance. She's welcoming the dumpster fire. She wants it. She approached me. This wasn't my idea. I'm actually working on another Me Against the Room with some different Christians this time. So yeah, this is something she wants to do. She feels like she wants to do. And all of you guys that have sent me messages, not a single one of you have taken this opportunity. I'm a shitty mod. I'm basically going to make sure you're not talking over each other, and you're not slurring each other. But other than that, it's like no holds bar. So yeah, take up that offer or shut the fuck up about Allie. One real quick thing, just in reference to something Chris said, and it also, so the after show as well. I'm not going to be able to do the Patreon after show. I will try to maybe do that maybe in a separate call or something. I don't know. This went really, really long, and I have literally, by the time I get to bed, I'm gonna have 7 hours before I have to wake up and take my daughter, get my daughter ready for school. So that being said, Chris was talking about the price of books. I collect signed books. So yeah, I've spent. I think the most I've ever spent was $1,200 on a book. So yeah, I'm a dork. But outside of that, this was a really great stream. I'm not upset at all that it went so long. Sorry I won't be able to show up in Discord. If you want to show up and have an after show and talk to some of the pagans that'll be there and have more questions, feel free to do so. But I literally will have to go to sleep as soon as we end this stream. Want to thank everybody for showing up. It was a pretty good turnout tonight. And yeah, I feel like I learned a lot. I really just sat back and let my friends have their night. My final thought on this is all of these theists here are friends of mine, and they know me, and they know that my ways and my mannerisms, and I'm a raging atheist, and yet they still accept me. Very few Christians have done that. Including people that have known me my entire life and claim to love me my entire life. So I find a special bond with pagans. And maybe it's easier for me as an atheist because I have past history practicing the Native American religion, Buddhism. I practiced several different religions. I wasn't completely confined to Christianity. Maybe it's easier for me. But I would just hope that, more and more in the atheist community, and there are some big names doing it. I commend them all. Show this allyship and show this respect and this will to fight bad ideas and bad things that happen in our society, and be willing to be allies even if we disagree, and friends even if we disagree on things. And I think that's what's most important. So with that, I'm going to close out. I want to thank everybody for coming, for asking your questions. Sorry if we didn't get to your questions, but like we said, we're now an hour and 40 minutes over. So I'm going to get out of here. You guys have a wonderful night.